The Tuck Rule Game, 2001. It was January 19th, 2002. The AFC divisional playoff between the Oakland Raiders and the New England Patriots was already a battle. Snow was falling hard at Foxborough Stadium, and the Patriots were trailing 13-10 late in the fourth quarter. With under 2 minutes left, Tom Brady dropped back to pass. He was hit from behind by Raiders cornerback Charles Woodson, and the ball came loose. Oakland recovered. The game looked over. The Patriots' season, and maybe Brady's Cinderella story, was about to end. Then came the review. After several minutes under the hood, referee Walt Coleman announced that Brady's fumble was being overturned. The ruling cited an obscure clause in the rulebook known as the Tuck Rule. According to that rule, a quarterback's forward arm motion that had not yet been completed, even if he was bringing the ball back toward his body, still counted as an incomplete pass. Almost no one watching had ever heard of it, but the result stood. The Patriots kept the ball, tied the game, and won in overtime on a clutch kick by Adam Vinatieri. They would go on to win their first Super Bowl 2 weeks later. That moment didn't just flip the outcome of a playoff game. It launched the most successful dynasty in NFL history, put Tom Brady on a path to greatness, and created a nationwide debate about how rules should be interpreted versus how the game should be played. The Tuck Rule was eventually eliminated in 2013, but the damage had already been done. The AFL-NFL merger, 1970. For most of the 1960s, pro football was split between two leagues, the established NFL and the upstart AFL, a newer, flashier rival with its own stars, TV deals, and fan bases. The leagues were competing for talent, viewership, and market share, and the bidding wars were escalating fast. By 1966, the battle reached a tipping point. Team owners on both sides realized the fight wasn't sustainable. Players' salaries were rising, TV contracts were overlapping, and cities couldn't support two franchises. The only solution was unity. In 1970, the merger became official. The AFL and NFL combined into one league. The teams were split into two conferences, the NFC and the AFC, each with its own divisions and playoff structure. The merger created a centralized league with national reach. It boosted television revenue, standardized scheduling, and gave rise to the modern postseason format. Without the merger, there's no Super Bowl Sunday, no dynasties that span conferences, no unified league with 32 franchises pulling in billions every year. The 1982 NFL players' strike. In the fall of 1982, NFL players walked off the field and refused to return until the league changed how they were treated. It was the first major labor stoppage in modern football, and it shook the foundation of the sport. The players weren't asking for more money. They were asking for something deeper, a share of the NFL's growing revenue and better long-term security. At the time, salaries were low compared to other pro sports. Free agency didn't really exist, and players had little power over their own careers. The strike lasted 57 days and wiped out 7 weeks of the regular season. It was chaotic. Replacement players were briefly considered. Networks scrambled to fill airtime. Fans grew restless. But the players held firm. Eventually, the league and the union reached a deal. It wasn't perfect, but it introduced the idea of a revenue-sharing model and started the conversation about free agency and guaranteed contracts. The season resumed with a shortened 9-game schedule and an expanded 16-team playoff tournament, dubbed the Super Bowl Tournament. Washington won the title, but the bigger story was what the players had accomplished. That strike cracked the door open. It paved the way for future labor negotiations, the eventual creation of true free agency, and a stronger players' union. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. The introduction of the salary cap, 1994. When the NFL implemented the salary cap in 1994, it completely changed how teams were built and how long they could stay great. Before the cap, deep-pocketed franchises could outspend their rivals and hoard talent. Big market teams had a clear advantage, and dynasties could be bought. But after years of labor disputes, including strikes in 1982 and 1987, the league and players' union agreed to a new system, free agency for players, and a salary cap to keep rosters balanced. The cap put a hard limit on how much teams could spend on player contracts each year. Suddenly, every front office had to make tough decisions. Do you pay your star quarterback and lose 2 defensive starters? Do you cut a Pro Bowler to stay under the number? It forced creativity. General managers had to think long-term. Contract restructures, cap hits, dead money all became part of the new NFL language. It also brought unexpected parity. In the years that followed, more teams reached the Super Bowl. More worst-to-first turnarounds happened, and small market teams became legitimate contenders. The cap didn't just level the playing field, it created a new kind of game behind the scenes. Franchises that mastered the cap, like the Patriots, Steelers, and Eagles, stayed competitive for years. Others who mismanaged it faced years of painful rebuilds. Tom Brady takes over for Drew Bledsoe, 2001. On September 23, 2001, the Patriots were 0-2, and their $100 million franchise quarterback, Drew Bledsoe, had just taken a brutal hit from Jets linebacker Mo Lewis. He suffered internal bleeding and was rushed to the hospital. That injury changed the future of the NFL. In stepped Tom Brady, a sixth-round pick, backup quarterback, and complete unknown outside of New England. What followed didn't look historic at first. Brady managed the game, avoided mistakes, and slowly helped the team find its rhythm. But by mid-season, the Patriots started winning. They rallied around Brady's poise, leadership, and accuracy. By December, Bledsoe was healthy again. Head coach Bill Belichick had a decision to make. Go back to the veteran or stick with the unknown. He stuck with Brady. New England finished 11-5, reached the Super Bowl, and pulled off a stunning upset of the Rams' greatest show on turf. Brady led a game-winning drive in the final minutes and was named Super Bowl MVP. That wasn't just the start of a career, it was the start of a dynasty. Over the next 2 decades, Brady would win 7 Super Bowls, 3 MVPs, and rewrite the record books. But none of it happens without one hit, one injury, and one coach choosing to roll the dice. The catch, Dwight Clark, 1981 NFC Championship. It was January 10, 1982. The 49ers were down 27-21 to the Dallas Cowboys with less than a minute left in the NFC Championship game. On 3rd and 3 from the 6-yard line, Joe Montana rolled right, pump faked, and lofted the ball toward the back of the end zone. Dwight Clark leapt, arms extended, fingertips stretched. He pulled it down just inside the end line. That touchdown, now known simply as the catch, gave San Francisco the lead and sent them to their first Super Bowl. But its impact went far beyond the scoreboard. The catch ended the Cowboys' dominance in the NFC and marked the beginning of the 49ers dynasty. It solidified Joe Montana as a clutch performer. It gave Bill Walsh's West Coast offense its defining moment. And it introduced a new football power on the West Coast that would win 5 Super Bowls over the next 14 years. It also became one of the NFL's most replayed moments, not because of its degree of difficulty, but because of what it meant. A handoff between eras, a changing of the guard. Years later, Clark would say he never expected the ball to come to him. He was just running his route. The Immaculate Reception, 1972. December 23rd, 1972, AFC Divisional Playoff, Steelers versus Raiders at Three Rivers Stadium. With 22 seconds left, Pittsburgh trailed 7-6. On 4th and 10 from their own 40-yard line, Terry Bradshaw dropped back, scrambled under pressure, and fired a desperate pass toward running back Frenchie Fuqua. The ball never reached him cleanly. As Fuqua and Raiders safety, Jack Tatum, collided, the ball ricocheted back toward midfield. Out of nowhere, rookie running back Franco Harris scooped it out of the air inches above the turf, sprinted down the sideline, and scored the game-winning touchdown. The stadium erupted. The Raiders protested. The officials huddled. No one knew if the ball had hit Fuqua or Tatum or the ground. After several tense minutes, the referees ruled it a touchdown. The Steelers had won, and a new chapter in NFL history had begun. It was Pittsburgh's first playoff win in franchise history, and it came on a play so surreal that it was immediately nicknamed the Immaculate Reception. That moment didn't just change the outcome of one game, it jump-started a dynasty. Over the next 8 seasons, the Steelers would win 4 Super Bowls and become the league's gold standard. To this day, debate still lingers over whether the play was legal under the rules of the time. Colin Kaepernick kneels during National Anthem 2016. On August 26, 2016, during a preseason game between the 49ers and Packers, Colin Kaepernick remained seated on the bench during the National Anthem. The moment went largely unnoticed at first, but when asked afterward, Kaepernick explained his reasoning plainly. He was protesting police brutality and systemic racism in America. The following week, he began kneeling instead of sitting after consulting with former Green Beret and NFL player Nate Boyer, who told him kneeling would show respect while still making a statement. That single adjustment turned the moment into a movement. What followed was one of the most polarizing stretches in modern NFL history. Some saw Kaepernick's protest as a powerful stand for justice. Others saw it as disrespectful to the flag and the military. The league found itself at the center of a national cultural debate, as other players joined in, kneeling, raising fists, or staying in the locker room during the anthem. The backlash was swift. Kaepernick opted out of his contract after the season, but he never played another snap in the NFL. Many believed he was blackballed for his activism. His protests sparked years of conversation, not just in sports, but across politics, media, and entertainment. The NFL, initially silent and hesitant, eventually acknowledged the issues he raised, especially after the nationwide protests of 2020. The Saints Bountygate scandal, 2012. In 2012, the NFL dropped a bombshell. A league investigation revealed that the New Orleans Saints had operated a bounty system from 2009 to 2011, a program where defensive players were financially rewarded for injuring opponents. Hits that knocked quarterbacks out of games were worth the most. The system had been run by defensive coordinator Greg Williams, with the knowledge of several coaches and players. The NFL called it a violation of the league's integrity of the game. The fallout was massive. Head coach Sean Payton was suspended for the entire 2012 season, the first time in modern NFL history a head coach was banned for any reason. Greg Williams was suspended indefinitely. General manager Mickey Loomis and several players, including linebacker Jonathan Vilma, received multi-game suspensions. The scandal sent shockwaves through the league. It painted the Saints' Super Bowl winning defense in a new light, and raised uncomfortable questions about the culture of violence in football. But it also forced a reckoning. In the years that followed, the NFL rewrote its player safety rules. Helmet-to-helmet hits, late shots on quarterbacks, and unnecessary roughness penalties increased. Fines were handed out weekly. The league created new protocols around concussions, injury reporting, and coach oversight. The helmet catch. David Tyree, Super Bowl 42, February 3, 2008. The New England Patriots were 18-0 and one win away from completing the first perfect season since the 1972 Dolphins. The Giants were a wild card team led by a quarterback still fighting for respect. With 1:15 left in the fourth quarter, the Giants trailed 14-10 and faced 3rd and 5 from their own 44-yard line. Eli Manning dropped back. Pressure closed in, and the pocket collapsed. Somehow, he spun away from 3 defenders and heaved the ball down the middle of the field. David Tyree, a special teams player with just 4 catches all season, leapt and pinned the ball against his helmet as he crashed to the turf. Patriot safety. Rodney Harrison had his arms all over him, but Tyree never let go. The play gained 32 yards. 4 snaps later, Manning found Plaxico Burress in the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown. The Giants won 17-14. The perfect season was over, and the Patriots' bid for immortality vanished. The helmet catch became one of the most iconic plays in NFL history, not just because of its degree of difficulty, but because of its impact. It ended what could have been the greatest team of all time and turned Eli Manning from a question mark into a legend. The hit that changed everything. Darryl Stingley, 1978. It was a preseason game on August 12, 1978. The New England Patriots were facing the Oakland Raiders. On a routine crossing route, wide receiver Darryl Stingley leapt for a pass and never got up again. As the ball arrived, Raiders safety Jack Tatum delivered a crushing hit to Stingley's upper body. There was no flag, no penalty, no fine, but the consequences were permanent. Stingley fractured 2 vertebrae in his neck and was left paralyzed from the chest down. He was just 26 years old. At the time, the NFL prided itself on violence. Big hits were celebrated. There were no rules protecting receivers over the middle, no restrictions on helmet contact, and little regard for long-term health. But Stingley's injury changed the conversation. The hit became a turning point in how the league viewed safety, even if the response came slowly. Over time, new rules were introduced to protect defenseless receivers. Spearing was outlawed. Helmet-to-helmet contact became a penalty. Eventually, the NFL adopted a full player safety initiative. Stingley never regained the ability to walk. He never publicly blamed Tatum, and in the years that followed, he became a symbol of the game's hidden cost. The risk every player takes with every snap. The expansion of instant replay, 1999. In 1999, the NFL brought back something that had once been scrapped, instant replay. But this time, it came with a new system, coaches' challenges, red flags, and a formal process for correcting on-field mistakes. The idea was simple. If a team believed the officials got a crucial call wrong, they could challenge it. A referee would review the play on a sideline monitor and make a decision based on clear visual evidence. Each coach had 2 challenges per game, with a third if both were successful. The system didn't just change how games were officiated, it changed how they were watched. Every close play became a moment of suspense. Fans learned to wait before celebrating. Broadcasters showed a dozen angles. Coaches adjusted how they used timeouts, knowing one could buy them a game-altering review. Referees, once the final word on the field, became part of a larger, camera-driven process. It also sparked debates. Some argued it slowed the game down. Others believed it didn't go far enough. Over the years, the replay system expanded further, adding automatic reviews for scoring plays, turnovers, and even brief experiments with reviewing penalties. The move of the Browns to Baltimore, 1996. In November 1995, Cleveland fans were blindsided. Team owner Art Modell announced he was relocating the Browns to Baltimore for the 1996 season. Just like that, one of the NFL's most storied franchises, with a rich history and fiercely loyal fan base, was leaving its city behind. The backlash was immediate and explosive. Cleveland fans protested. Politicians got involved. Lawsuits were filed. The team finished the season in a half-empty stadium, filled with angry chants and flying debris. It wasn't just about football. It was about identity, pride, and betrayal. But what followed changed how the NFL handles relocations forever. After intense negotiations, the league struck a deal. The Browns' name, colors, and history would remain in Cleveland. The franchise would go on a 3-year hiatus, and a new Browns team would return in 1999 as an expansion club with all the original branding intact. Meanwhile, Modell's team became the Baltimore Ravens, a brand new franchise on paper, but one that inherited the players, coaches, and infrastructure from Cleveland. Within 5 years, they won a Super Bowl. The move set a precedent. No other NFL relocation has come with such a compromise. It created a model where cities could retain the rights to their team's identity, even after the physical franchise left. It also showed how deeply a team can be tied to a city's culture, and how painful it is when that bond is broken. Patrick Mahomes' 2018 breakout season. In 2018, Patrick Mahomes didn't just become a star, he changed what the quarterback position looked like. In his first season as a full-time starter, Mahomes threw for 5,097 yards and 50 touchdowns, becoming just the 3rd quarterback in history to hit both marks in a single year. He made throws that didn't seem physically possible. Sidearm lasers, no-look passes, off-platform bombs while scrambling away from pressure. It wasn't just production, it was style and swagger. And something entirely new. With Andy Reid calling plays and an arsenal of weapons around him, Mahomes led the Chiefs to a 12-4 record and the AFC Championship game. He won league MVP and became the youngest quarterback to ever do so. But more importantly, he broke the mold. For decades, the NFL sought tall, pocket-bound quarterbacks with mechanical precision. Mahomes introduced a new blueprint: creative, improvisational, and fearless. Suddenly, arm angles mattered less than instincts. Scripted plays mattered less than second reactions. Young quarterbacks entering the league were no longer asked to fit into old systems. They were encouraged to bring their own. Coaches began designing offenses around their QB's raw ability, rather than trying to smooth it out. The first Super Bowl, 1967. On January 15, 1967, the Green Bay Packers faced the Kansas City Chiefs in the first ever AFL-NFL World Championship game, a matchup that would later be renamed the Super Bowl. The stadium in Los Angeles wasn't even sold out. The game aired on 2 competing networks. The hype was minimal compared to what it would become. But what took place that day laid the foundation for the biggest sporting event in American culture. Vince Lombardi's Packers won decisively, 35-10, asserting NFL dominance over the younger AFL. But the game itself was just the beginning. Television ratings proved there was a massive appetite for a single national championship. Within a few years, the Super Bowl evolved into an American institution, with massive halftime shows, iconic commercials, and weeks of non-stop media coverage. It became the one game that even non-football fans tuned in for. More than a title game, the Super Bowl became the league's brand. Its global reach helped the NFL pass baseball as America's most watched sport. Every franchise began building with one goal in mind, not just to win games, but to win that game. What started as an awkward experiment in 1967 is now the most watched annual broadcast in the United States. Ray Rice elevator video, 2014. In February 2014, Ravens running back Ray Rice was arrested after an altercation with his then-fiancée, Jenna Palmer, in an Atlantic City hotel. Security footage showed Rice dragging her unconscious body out of an elevator. The NFL initially suspended him for just 2 games, a decision that sparked immediate outrage. But then came the second video. Released by TMZ in September, the footage showed the full incident inside the elevator, Rice striking Palmer with a punch that knocked her out cold. The reaction was swift and seismic. The Ravens terminated his contract. The NFL suspended him indefinitely. League Commissioner Roger Goodell came under intense scrutiny for the league's mishandling of the case. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a reckoning. The NFL faced a tidal wave of criticism from fans, sponsors, media, and politicians. Questions about the league's culture, its policies on domestic violence, and its commitment to player accountability dominated headlines. In response, the NFL overhauled its personal conduct policy. It introduced a 6-game baseline suspension for first-time domestic violence offenses and created a dedicated conduct committee. Teams became more cautious in signing players with off-field concerns, and league investigations into player behavior became more aggressive and more public. Ray Rice never played another down in the NFL. The 2007 Patriots Spygate scandal. In September 2007, the NFL launched an investigation into the New England Patriots after the New York Jets accused them of videotaping defensive signals from the sideline, a violation of league rules. The allegations were true. The Patriots had filmed opponents' hand signals for years, compiling data to help decode defensive schemes in real time. Head coach Bill Belichick was fined $50,000, the largest fine ever given to a coach. The team lost a first-round draft pick. The scandal became known as Spygate, and it cast a shadow over one of the most dominant franchises in NFL history. The timing made it worse. That same season, the Patriots would go 16-0 in the regular season and fall just short of a perfect year in Super Bowl 42. For critics, Spygate gave them reason to question how New England had built its dynasty. For supporters, it added fuel to the argument that every team pushed the rules, but only the Patriots got caught. The fallout changed the way the league monitored competitive fairness. Teams became more paranoid. Sideline security was tightened. The NFL revised its policies on video access and created stricter enforcement of signal use. Years later, new scandals like Deflategate would reignite old suspicions, many rooted in the events of 2007, the invention of NFL Red Zone, 2009. In 2009, the NFL launched something that completely changed how fans watched football, NFL Red Zone. Hosted by Scott Hanson, Red Zone was a commercial-free broadcast that jumped from game to game every Sunday afternoon, showing only the most important plays, especially when teams entered the red zone. No timeouts, no punts, no filler, just constant action. At first, it seemed like a niche product, but it quickly became a phenomenon. Red Zone transformed the way fans consumed football. Instead of following one team, viewers could track every touchdown, every big play, every upset as it unfolded live. Fantasy football players loved it. Sports bettors loved it. Casual fans found it easier to follow the league as a whole. Red Zone also reshaped the broadcast industry. Networks began adapting their graphics and highlight packages to match its fast-paced style. viewership patterns changed. Fans grew less attached to traditional broadcasts and more addicted to the nonstop adrenaline of 7 hours of commercial-free football. Today, Red Zone is a staple of the NFL viewing experience, especially for younger audiences. It made Sunday afternoons feel like an event, even if your team wasn't playing. The collapse of Damar Hamlin, 2023. On January 2nd, 2023, the world was watching Monday Night Football. The Buffalo Bills were playing the Cincinnati Bengals in a game with major playoff implications. Then, in the first quarter, after what looked like a routine tackle, 24-year-old safety Damar Hamlin stood up and immediately collapsed. What followed wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a moment that froze the entire sports world. Trainers and medical personnel rushed onto the field. Within seconds, CPR was being administered. Players from both teams knelt, prayed, cried. The stadium fell silent. Fans at home watched in disbelief as ESPN cut to commercial, then returned with stunned commentators who didn't know what to say. An ambulance carried Hamlin off the field after nearly 10 minutes of resuscitation efforts. The game was postponed and later canceled altogether. Hamlin had suffered cardiac arrest, and for a brief window of time, nothing else in football mattered. The incident sparked a nationwide conversation about player health and emergency preparedness. The NFL reviewed and strengthened its sideline medical protocols. Teams' updated response plans, defibrillators, and emergency equipment became focal points of discussion, not just in stadiums, but in schools, gyms, and public spaces across the country. More than anything, it reminded people, fans, players, coaches, owners, of just how fragile the game really is. Damar Hamlin survived. He returned to the field the following season, an inspiration to millions. The Philly Special, 2018. Super Bowl LII. The Philadelphia Eagles were underdogs against the New England Patriots, a dynasty with 5 rings, a Hall of Fame quarterback, and all the pressure on their side. With 38 seconds left in the first half, the Eagles faced 4th and goal from the 1-yard line. Most teams would take the field goal. Most quarterbacks wouldn't want the ball snapped to someone else in the red zone. But this wasn't most teams, and this wasn't most moments. The Eagles lined up in an unusual formation. Running back Corey Clement shifted behind center. Tight end Trey Burton took a reverse pitch, then lofted the ball to quarterback Nick Foles, wide open in the end zone. Touchdown. Foles became the first quarterback in Super Bowl history to catch a touchdown pass. The gutsy call stunned everyone, including the Patriots. More than just a trick play, it symbolized head coach Doug Peterson's aggressive, fearless game plan. Philadelphia would go on to win 41-33, capturing the franchise's first Super Bowl title. The Philly Special became instant folklore. The Holy Roller, 1978. September 10th, 1978. The Oakland Raiders were trailing the San Diego Chargers 20-14 with 10 seconds left and no timeouts. They were 14 yards from the end zone and needed a miracle. Quarterback Ken Stabler dropped back, and just as he was about to be sacked, he let the ball loose. Officially, it was ruled a fumble. The ball rolled forward. Running back Pete Banasack tried to fall on it, but instead batted it even closer to the goal line. Then, tight end Dave Casper swatted it once more, before finally recovering it in the end zone for a touchdown. Chaos followed. The officials huddled. The Chargers protested, but the touchdown stood. The Raiders won the game 21-20. The play looked suspicious, and it was. Years later, both Stabler and Banasack admitted they deliberately pushed the ball forward. At the time, there was no rule against it. But that changed almost immediately. The NFL instituted a new rule. In the final 2 minutes of a half or on 4th down, only the fumbling player could advance the ball. If a teammate pushed it forward, the ball would return to the spot of the original fumble. It was a direct response to what became known as the Holy Roller, one of the most controversial and influential plays in NFL history. Because of it, late-game fumble strategy changed forever, and the league made clear you could improvise but not manipulate. The Miracle at the Meadowlands, 1978. November 19th, 1978. The New York Giants were seconds away from victory against the Philadelphia Eagles. They had the ball, the lead, and the game clock down to its final moments. The Eagles had no timeouts left. All the Giants had to do was kneel. But they didn't. Instead, head coach John McVay called a running play. Quarterback Joe Pisarcik turned to hand the ball off to fullback Larry Sonka, but the exchange was botched. The ball hit the turf. Eagles defensive back Herman Edwards, yes, the future head coach, scooped it up and sprinted into the end zone for a shocking walk-off touchdown. The Giants were stunned. The home crowd was silent. What should have been a routine clock-killing snap became one of the biggest blunders in NFL history. The fallout was immediate. The Giants' offensive coordinator was fired the next day. Their fan base, already frustrated with years of mediocrity, erupted in anger, and the league took notice. This single moment led to the creation and widespread adoption of the victory formation, the now standard kneel-down play used to safely run out the clock. It's the most basic play in football today, but before this game, it wasn't common practice. The Hail Mary, 1975, December 28, 1975, NFC Divisional Playoffs. The Dallas Cowboys were down 14-10 to the Minnesota Vikings with 32 seconds left. The season was on the line. Roger Staubach dropped back and launched a deep, desperate pass toward wide receiver Drew Pearson, streaking down the right sideline. Pearson adjusted mid-route, reeled the ball in near the 5-yard line, and walked into the end zone. Touchdown. Cowboys take the lead. Game over. But what happened next mattered just as much as the catch itself. In the post-game interview, Staubach said, "I closed my eyes and said a Hail Mary." That offhand comment gave the moment its name and gave football one of its most iconic phrases. Before that play, Hail Mary was a term mostly used in Catholic prayer. After that play, it became forever linked with last-second desperation heaves in football and in sports culture at large. The Vikings protested, arguing Pearson had pushed off. Replays were inconclusive. The call stood, and the outrage added to the mystique. The Cowboys advanced, the Vikings were eliminated, and history had a new term for miracle plays. Today, every improbable deep ball, from Doug Flutie's throw to Kyler Murray's miracle to Aaron Rodgers' bombs, traces its lineage to that moment. Calvin Ridley, suspended for betting, 2021. In March 2022, the NFL made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the league. Calvin Ridley, star wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, was suspended for the entire 2022 season. The reason? He had placed bets on NFL games, including games involving the Falcons, during a 5-day period while he was away from the team on the non-football illness list. The league's investigation found no evidence of inside information or game manipulation. Ridley said he bet just $1,500 and didn't believe he was doing anything wrong, but the punishment was clear and severe. The NFL made an example out of him. At the time, sports betting was rapidly expanding across the U.S., with teams and stadiums striking partnerships with sportsbooks. Fans could now legally wager on games in real time from their phones. But for players, the rules hadn't changed. Betting on games was strictly forbidden. Ridley's suspension was a message. The league wanted to reinforce a clear boundary between the sport and the betting industry, fueling its revenue growth. Protecting the integrity of the game became the official line. The backlash was fierce. Critics pointed out the contrast between Ridley's year-long ban and shorter suspensions, given for more serious off-field incidents. But the precedent was set. Even in a betting-friendly era, the NFL showed it would come down hard on any player who blurred that line, regardless of intent or amount wagered. Congress Grills, the NFL about concussions. 2009. In October 2009, the NFL found itself in an unfamiliar place, not on the field, but under oath. The U.S. House Judiciary Committee summoned league executives, doctors, and former players to testify about one thing: concussions. For years, the NFL had downplayed the link between football and long-term brain damage. League-funded research claimed there was no evidence that repeated concussions led to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. But players were suffering and dying, and the science was catching up. Then came the hearing. Lawmakers pressed the NFL on why it denied mounting evidence from independent researchers. They questioned the league's motives, its handling of player safety, and the credibility of its in-house medical committees. Representative Linda Sanchez famously compared the NFL to big tobacco, accusing it of using studies to deny the obvious connection between football and head trauma. The hearing wasn't just performative. It exposed cracks in the league's stance and forced real change. Just weeks later, the NFL updated its concussion protocols. Independent neurologists were added to the sideline evaluation process. Public messaging shifted. For the first time, the league acknowledged that repeated blows to the head could lead to long-term problems. Overtime rules change after Chiefs beat Bills 2021. In the 2021 AFC Divisional Playoff, football fans witnessed one of the greatest quarterback duels in NFL history. Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen, the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Buffalo Bills. And with 25 points scored in the final 2 minutes of regulation, it was pure chaos. But the ending sparked outrage. The Bills had just taken the lead with 13 seconds left. Somehow, Mahomes drove the Chiefs into field goal range in those final seconds, forcing overtime. Kansas City won the coin toss. And that was that. Mahomes led a touchdown drive. Game over. Josh Allen never got to touch the ball. Despite both teams combining for nearly 1,000 yards and 78 points, the game was decided by a coin flip and a single possession. The backlash was immediate. Critics had long questioned the NFL's overtime rules, but this time felt different. The stakes were higher. The quarterback performances were legendary, and millions of fans watched one of the best games ever played end without both teams having a fair shot. The NFL heard the noise. In March 2022, the league approved a rule change. In playoff games, both teams would now be guaranteed at least one possession in overtime, regardless of whether the first team scored a touchdown. The 1920s, the leather helmet era. This is where it all began, and it barely resembled football. In 1920, the league was called the American Professional Football Association, which sounds less like a sports league and more like an insurance firm. There were no real rules, no real structure, and definitely no forward passes. Teams came and went like pop-up shops. One team was literally named the Muncie Flyers, and they lasted exactly one game. The best team was the Akron Pros, who went undefeated and allowed just 7 points all season. How? Easy. Nobody could score. Players didn't wear helmets. They wore leather hats. Tackling someone was more of a mutual agreement than a technique. And if you broke your nose, tough. Rub some dirt on it and play both ways. There were no playoffs. The champion was decided by whoever had the best record. And if two teams were tied, the league just kinda picked a winner. The crowds were small. The money was even smaller. But the 1920s gave football its bones. And they did it all with 0 face masks, 10-yard punts, and a ball that looked more like a loaf of bread than a spiral weapon. 1930s. Football gets a brain. The league was still awkward, but starting to figure itself out. They renamed it to the National Football League in 1922, which finally made it sound less like a tax group and more like something people might watch. This was the era when teams started surviving past one season. The Green Bay Packers became an early powerhouse. The Chicago Bears were the league's first real villains. And Bronco Nagurski was every 1930s football highlight, because he was the highlight. Coaching started becoming a real job. Strategy entered the chat. Formations like the T formation and single wing began appearing, even if no one knew how to defend them yet. But most importantly, in 1933, the NFL finally separated itself from college football by creating its own rule book. Until then, they had just borrowed college rules like a bad roommate. Now, the league started shaping its identity. They moved the goalpost to the front of the end zone. They legalized passing from anywhere behind the line of scrimmage, which was a wild concept at the time. And they finally created a championship game. The 1930s didn't make the game popular, but they made it watchable. And they started a trend that would define every decade after. 1940s, the war years, and the quarterback revolution. The 1940s were a weird time to be a football fan, because half the league got drafted. Literally. World War II drained NFL rosters faster than a bad GM. Guys who were stars one year were suddenly off fighting in Europe the next. Some teams were so low on players, they just merged with each other. The Eagles and Steelers combined in 1943 to form a team called the Steagles, a name that sounds like a rejected XFL franchise. The next year, the Steelers merged again, this time with the Chicago Cardinals. The result? A team so bad they went 0-10 and were nicknamed Card Pit, pronounced carpet, because everyone walked all over them. But somehow, Football survived. And not only did it survive, it evolved. This is the decade where quarterbacks became quarterbacks. The Chicago Bears and head coach George Halas introduced the modernized T formation, which actually let QBs stand behind center, take the snap, and do things other than hand the ball off and pray. Sid Luckman was the prototype. He threw 28 touchdowns in 1943, which doesn't sound like much now, but it was absolutely insane for the time. Remember, most teams still thought passing was a gimmick. Luckman made it look like the future, and he wasn't alone. Other legends emerged, like Sammy Baugh, who didn't just play quarterback, he also punted and played defense. In 1943, he led the league in passing, punting, and interceptions in the same season. Imagine Patrick Mahomes throwing for 300 yards, picking off a pass, then pinning the other team at their own 5. That was Sammy Baugh. The decade ended with one of the most iconic games in NFL history, the 1946 championship. But the real significance? In 1946, the NFL finally desegregated, reintegrating black players after a 12-year ban. Guys like Kenny Washington and Woody Strode broke the barrier, a full year before Jackie Robinson joined MLB. It didn't get the same headlines, but it was just as historic. The 1940s were gritty, improvised, and deeply flawed. But they made two things very clear. 1. Football was going to keep going, no matter what. 2. The quarterback wasn't just part of the offense anymore, he was the offense. 1950s, TV, tactics, and the birth of the Golden Boy QB. The NFL was done freeloading off college football. It wanted its own look, its own rules, and its own Saturday night spotlight. And it got it, thanks to the television boom. By 1950, games were being broadcast in living rooms across America. The NFL went from being a niche blood sport for steelworkers to a scheduled weekly ritual. The visuals weren't great. Grainy black and white, awful camera angles, and audio that sounded like it was recorded in a submarine. But still, it worked. Football had officially entered the home, and with TV came stars. Enter Johnny Unitas, the original prototype for the modern quarterback. Black high tops, crew cut, ice in his veins. He ran the 2-minute drill like a Wall Street day trader, fast and reckless. He played with toughness, brains, and a literal broken nose most Sundays. He led the Baltimore Colts to greatness, and in 1958, he gave the league its first classic, the 1958 NFL Championship game. Colts versus Giants, Yankee Stadium. It was the first game to go to sudden death overtime. It was nationally televised, and it was chaos, fumbles, field goals, and Unitas orchestrating one of the coolest game-winning drives in NFL history. They called it the greatest game ever played. Was it? Maybe. But more importantly, it made the NFL matter. Meanwhile, coaching got smarter. Paul Brown was cooking up new strategies in Cleveland. He invented playbooks, practiced game film review, and even put radios in helmets. Decades before Belichick would try the same tricks. The game started to look familiar. Quarterbacks calling audibles. Defenses adjusting to formations. Stats getting tracked weekly. And while the game still had a long way to go, players still wore suspender-style pads and smoked at halftime. The 1950s gave football a real identity. 1960s, the AFL rebellion, Joe Namath, and the birth of the Super Bowl. The decade opened with a curveball, the birth of a rival league, the American Football League, AFL. The NFL had grown comfortable, structured, traditional, a bit boring. The AFL, it was loud, it was fast, it had style. They gave birth to the Houston Oilers, San Diego Chargers, Oakland Raiders, and Kansas City Chiefs. Franchises that would later become cornerstones of the modern NFL. And it didn't stop there. They went head-to-head in the draft, in salary wars, and even stole players from the NFL. It was football's version of a rap beef, only with shoulder pads and significantly worse haircuts. At the center of it all was a guy named Joe Namath. Broadway Joe. Fur coats, white cleats, endless charisma. He was built for TV. He wasn't just a quarterback, he was a celebrity, and in 1969, he made a guarantee that changed everything. In Super Bowl III, his underdog Jets faced the heavily favored Baltimore Colts. Namath promised a win and delivered. It was the moment the AFL earned real respect, and it proved that the leagues had to merge. In 1966, the NFL and AFL had already agreed to combine. The Super Bowl was born. At first, it was just a championship game. By the end of the decade, it was already on its way to becoming a national holiday. Meanwhile, coaching legends were taking over. Vince Lombardi turned the Packers into a dynasty and Lombardi Trophy into the league's holy grail. Tom Landry gave the Cowboys their robotic precision and suit-on-the-sideline energy. Hank Stram brought innovation and headset energy before it was cool. And don't forget, the 1960s were when black athletes finally took center stage in pro football. Players like Jim Brown, Gale Sayers, and Willie Davis weren't just dominating, they were reshaping the game's future. The league was still mostly white-owned, white-run, and white-led, but the talent on the field was changing everything. The sport had officially hit the big leagues, and there was no going back. 1970s, defense, dynasties, and the Steel Curtain Age. The decade started with the NFL-AFL merger becoming official in 1970. Two leagues, one name, and a new structure. The NFC and the AFC with the Super Bowl, now the ultimate proving ground. And from that merger came the birth of true parity. Every team had a shot, and the league started taking that idea very seriously. But what really defined the 70s? Defense. Scoring was low, games were brutal. Helmet-to-helmet hits were just called tackles. There were games where teams didn't throw a pass for entire quarters. At the heart of it all, the Pittsburgh Steelers. From 1974 to 1979, they won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, an unmatched run of dominance. They had Terry Bradshaw, who threw like he was launching a rocket with no target. They had Franco Harris, the power back, who ran like he was angry at the ground. But more than anything, they had the Steel Curtain, a defensive line so nasty they made quarterbacks rethink their careers. Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount, these guys didn't just play defense, they imposed it. The Cowboys were right there too. Tom Landry's Dallas Cowboys became America's team, which annoyed basically everyone who wasn't a Cowboys fan. They had precision, polish, and Roger Staubach, the Navy veteran turned quarterback who invented the term Hail Mary in 1975. Meanwhile, the Oakland Raiders were chaos in cleats. They were rough, they were dirty, they looked like villains in a football movie, and they leaned into it. Head coach John Madden, yes, that John Madden, led them to a title in 1976, turning the Raiders into a cultural force. This was the NFL's bar fight era. No TikTok dances, no fantasy points, just cold weather, broken noses, and a nation falling in love with a sport that looked more like a war zone than a game. The league wasn't pretty, but it was real. And by the end of the decade, it was officially the most watched sport in America. 1980s, stars, swag, and the rise of the quarterback icon. This was the decade of quarterbacks, not just good ones, mythic ones. Joe Montana, the face of the NFL. Calm, cool, clutch. He didn't throw the ball, he placed it right in the hands of guys like Jerry Rice, who was just getting started. Together, they turned the San Francisco 49ers into a dynasty. 4 Super Bowl wins. Bill Walsh calling plays like he was running a Silicon Valley startup. They invented the West Coast offense, which changed everything. Short passes, timing, rhythm. It was less about brute force and more about outsmarting you. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, Lawrence Taylor showed up like a football horror movie, a linebacker who broke the game, fast enough to cover receivers, violent enough to shatter game plans. LT didn't just sack QBs, he made them scared to snap the ball. He single-handedly changed how teams blocked, drafted, and protected the quarterback. You also had Dan Marino, who threw for 5,000 yards in an era where most teams didn't even try to throw that much. John Elway, launching bombs off his back foot and dragging teams to Super Bowls with no help. Jim Kelly, leading the upstart Bills to prominence. This was the first decade where Super Bowl commercials became iconic. Halftime shows became productions, and players became products. The league leaned into pop culture. You had teams doing music videos, yes, the Super Bowl Shuffle happened in 1985, starring the Chicago Bears and a mustache-powered quarterback named Jim McMahon. That Bears team, by the way, one of the greatest defenses ever. Mike Singletary, Richard Dent, the Fridge. They bullied their way to a championship and danced on the way out. And while the game got more polished, the hits still came hard. This was the sweet spot before player safety became a priority, where you could launch yourself across the field like a missile and just get a thumbs up from the ref. The 90s, the business boom, brand wars, and the cowboy empire. The 1990s were the NFL's corporate takeover. By this point, the league had national TV deals, international reach, and player salaries that finally started looking like lottery winnings. Fox got the rights to NFC games, brought in robots and guitar riffs, and rebranded Sunday afternoons into an action movie. Suddenly, football wasn't just something you watched, it was something you followed like a full-time job. And no team defined the decade more than the Dallas Cowboys. They weren't just good, they were everywhere. Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, Deion Sanders. It was like someone created an NFL super team in a lab. 3 Super Bowl wins in 4 years. A team built on talent, swagger, and the occasional locker room scandal. Owner Jerry Jones turned the Cowboys into a brand. You didn't have to like them. In fact, most people didn't. But you knew them. And that was the point. Meanwhile, over in the AFC, pain. The Buffalo Bills went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost every single one. Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, they were loaded. But they just couldn't get over the hump. It became both legendary and tragic. They were so good, they ran out of excuses. To this day, Buffalo fans will tell you it wasn't failure, it was fate. And then there was Brett Favre. He became the face of the Green Bay Packers, bringing them back to relevance and giving Wisconsin a reason to scream in the snow again. In 1996, he finally delivered a Super Bowl win and got a Wrangler deal that lasted longer than most NFL careers. The Denver Broncos kept losing Super Bowls until John Elway got help and back-to-back rings in 97 and 98. And the NFL salary cap debuted in 1994, forcing teams to stop hoarding talent like Pokemon cards. The game itself, faster, smarter, sharper. Quarterbacks were now the centerpieces of the franchise, not just players, but investments. Teams built around them. Media obsessed over them. This was also the first time we really saw NFL fashion. Starter jackets, snapbacks. Kids who'd never seen a game wearing Raiders and Cowboys gear in the school hallway because it looked cool. By the end of the decade, the NFL was printing money, and one quiet 6th-round rookie was drafted in 1999. But we'll get to him soon. 2000s. The Dynasty decade, defensive blueprints, and the rise of the machine. The 2000s didn't waste time. The very first Super Bowl of the new millennium, on February 2000, was won by the greatest show on turf, the St. Louis Rams. Kurt Warner went from bagging groceries to throwing 40-yard bombs in domes. Marshall Faulk was playing a different sport, and the Rams' offense looked like it was running at 1.5x speed. It felt like a preview of the future. Except it wasn't. Because just 2 years later, the New England Patriots showed up and said, "We'll take it from here." A no-name 6th-rounder named Tom Brady replaced Drew Bledsoe mid-season, and, with the help of Bill Belichick, a hoodie-wearing defensive sorcerer, led New England to their first title in 2001. They did it with defense, clutch kicking, and the kind of clock management that felt calculated. Then they won again in 2003. Then again in 2004, 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, just like the Cowboys in the 90s, but colder, more efficient, less about personality, more about precision. The Patriots were a system. You didn't have to love them, but you couldn't beat them. Elsewhere, the 2000s were full of iconic moments and chaos. The Tuck Rule game, Brady vs. the Raiders in the snow, kicked off a new dynasty and ended a few friendships in Oakland. The Eagles under Andy Reid kept getting close, with Donovan McNabb, Brian Dawkins, and T.O. yelling on the sidelines like it was a soap opera. The Ravens built one of the nastiest defenses ever, led by Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and a quarterback situation that nobody remembers. Peyton Manning spent the entire decade being brilliant in the regular season, and cursed in the playoffs. Until 2006, when he finally got the monkey off his back. Brett Favre left Green Bay, Mike Vick electrified Atlanta, and LaDainian Tomlinson made the Chargers must-watch for anyone who liked touchdowns and flip celebrations. The salary cap got tighter. Free agency became critical. Defensive backs couldn't touch receivers like they used to, thanks in large part to Peyton Manning lobbying the league after the 2003 AFC title game. Pass interference became a weekly debate, and replay review became a permanent fixture. This was also the decade of growing paranoia. Spygate hit in 2007, accusing the Patriots of filming opponents' signals. Teams started covering their mouths on the sideline like they were in a poker tournament. Trust no one became the unofficial slogan of every coaching staff. And right at the end of the decade, we got the 2007 Patriots, a team that went 16-0 in the regular season with Brady and Randy Moss putting up video game numbers, only to lose in the Super Bowl to a 9-7 Giants team led by Eli Manning, a helmet catch, and the most chaotic fourth-quarter drive of all time. It was the perfect ending to the 2000s, and the NFL, now the undisputed king of American sports, 2010s. The analytics era, air shows, and the second act of a dynasty. The 2010s started with a bang, literally. The Saints won their first Super Bowl in 2009. Technically, February 2010, powered by Drew Brees, a surprise onside kick, and the city of New Orleans rallying behind one of the greatest comeback stories in sports history. It felt like a changing of the guard. The Patriots' run was over. Manning, Brees, Rodgers, this was their time. Except Brady wasn't done, not even close. This decade saw football go through a data explosion. Teams started hiring math nerds with glasses and spreadsheets. Terms like win probability and expected yards per play entered mainstream broadcasts. Punts on 4th and 3 became old school. Coaches like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan brought in play designs that looked like Madden playbooks. Motions, jet sweeps, pre-snap chaos. Defenses were guessing, and quarterbacks were feasting. Quarterbacks took over. Aaron Rodgers started the decade by winning a Super Bowl and spent the next 10 years doing things that looked fake on replay. Drew Brees racked up records like he was trying to complete a stat sheet for retirement. Andrew Luck arrived, dominated, and left before the decade ended. And then there was Patrick Mahomes, who showed up in 2018, rolled out to his right, and threw 60-yard lasers across his body like it was a normal Tuesday. By the end of the decade, Mahomes had an MVP, a Super Bowl, and a rocket arm that rewrote every rule. Don't worry, defenses still had their moment. The Legion of Boom turned Seattle into a fortress. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. They didn't just hit hard, they talked hard. In 2013, the Seahawks demolished the record-breaking Broncos in the Super Bowl. It wasn't even close. They were fast, physical, and mean. And for a while, it looked like a new dynasty was forming. But then came Super Bowl 49. Seattle, New England, 1 yard to win the game. And instead of giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch, they threw it. Malcolm Butler intercepted it. And the Patriots, again, were back on top. You'd think after 3 rings in the 2000s, Brady would slow down. He didn't. From 2014 to 2018, he made 4 more Super Bowls and won 3. He came back from 28-3 against the Falcons in Super Bowl 51, the greatest comeback in NFL history. He threw for 505 yards in a Super Bowl and lost. Then, in 2018, he won another by beating the Rams in a game where the final score looked like it was from the 1940s. Brady wasn't just a quarterback. He was a system-proof, time-resistant anomaly. Players embraced social media. Mic'd-up segments went viral. Odell Beckham Jr. made 1 catch on Sunday Night Football and turned into a global icon. Memes, fantasy football, and red zone turned casual fans into weekly addicts. The NFL was no longer just on TV. It was in your feed, in your group chat, and on your screen 7 days a week. 2020s, COVID, chaos, and the Mahomes era begins. The 2020 season was like a dystopian sci-fi movie. Empty stadiums, daily COVID tests, and players being pulled off the field mid-game because their test results came in late. Entire position groups got wiped out overnight. Games were rescheduled to Wednesdays. Coaches wore masks, refs wore face shields, and the crowd noise pumped in like laugh tracks on a sitcom. But somehow, the season finished. And in the end, Tom Brady, now in a Tampa Bay jersey, walked into Arrowhead Stadium in Super Bowl 55 and dismantled the Chiefs. At age 43, new team, new system, same ending. It was a mic drop. By the time Brady left the stage, Patrick Mahomes was already being crowned. He was already the most feared man in football. No-look passes, left-handed throws, fourth-quarter comebacks. He wasn't just playing QB, he was remixing it, but it wasn't smooth sailing. The 2021 season exposed cracks, injuries, inconsistent line play, and a shootout loss to Joe Burrow and the Bengals in the AFC Championship. Suddenly, Mahomes wasn't unstoppable. He was mortal. He bounced back with another MVP and a Super Bowl win over the Eagles in Super Bowl 57. The 2020s also marked a shift in how we watch the NFL. Games aren't just on cable. They're on Amazon Prime, Peacock, YouTube TV. Players have platforms now. They drop vlogs. They post mid-game tunnel fits. Some fans know Micah Parsons' YouTube channel better than his sack totals. And Travis Kelce went from elite tight end to Taylor Swift's boyfriend in one halftime. And on the field, we're watching the next wave take shape. C.J. Stroud looks like the real deal. Lamar Jackson is still redefining quarterback play. Caleb Williams is already being discussed like he's inevitable. And guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Micah Parsons are becoming the faces of a post-Brady, post-Breeze league. New England Patriots, 2001 to 2018. No dynasty in NFL history was longer, more controversial, or more dominant than the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. It started in 2001 when a 6th-round pick out of Michigan stepped in after Drew Bledsoe's injury. By the end of the year, Brady was holding the Lombardi Trophy, launching nearly 2 decades of control over the NFL. Across 18 seasons, the Patriots went to 9 Super Bowls, winning 6 championships. They posted 16 division titles, set the standard for regular season consistency, and reinvented themselves multiple times to stay ahead of the league. Early on, they were a defensive juggernaut built around names like Ty Law, Willie McGinest, and Teddy Bruschi. Then, in the mid-2000s, Brady evolved into an MVP quarterback, leading explosive passing attacks with Randy Moss, Wes Welker, Rob Gronkowski, and Julian Edelman. Even when personnel changed, the results didn't. The Patriots had iconic moments. The Tuck Rule game, Adam Vinatieri's clutch kicks, the undefeated 2007 season that ended 1 win short, Malcolm Butler's goal line interception, and the 28-3 comeback in Super Bowl 51. But what made them unique was longevity. While most dynasties last 5 to 7 years, New England stayed at the top for nearly 2 decades. They weathered controversies like Spygate and Deflategate, rebuilt rosters over and over, and kept winning. From 2001 through 2018, they were the team everyone measured themselves against. And in a league built on parity, no one has ever sustained greatness like they did. Pittsburgh Steelers, 1972 to 1979. The Pittsburgh Steelers of the 1970s were the definition of toughness and dominance in the NFL. Before this run, the Steelers had been one of the league's least successful franchises. But under head coach Chuck Noll, they drafted the core of a team that would change football forever. Terry Bradshaw at quarterback, Franco Harris at running back, Lynn Swann and John Stallworth at wide receiver. And on defense, the most feared unit in league history, the Steel Curtain. From 1972 to 1979, the Steelers won 4 Super Bowls in 6 seasons, including back-to-back championships twice, 1974 to 75 and 1976 to 77. 1978 to 1979, they became the first team in NFL history to win 4 Super Bowls, and they did it with balance. The offense evolved from Harris and the run game into one of the league's most dynamic passing attacks once Bradshaw developed. Swann and Stallworth made circus catches that defined Super Bowls, while Harris was the steady workhorse who never seemed to have a bad game. The defense, though, is what people remember most. Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mel Blount, L.C. Greenwood, Donnie Shell. The list of Hall of Famers is endless. The Steel Curtain smothered opponents, changed how passing was defended, and intimidated teams before they even took the field. The dynasty started with the Immaculate Reception in 1972, a play that seemed to mark the turning point for the entire franchise. By the end of the decade, the Steelers were the league's gold standard, and to this day, they remain the foundation of Pittsburgh's identity as the City of Champions. Green Bay Packers, 1960 to 1967. The Green Bay Packers of the 1960s were the blueprint for every dynasty that followed. Led by head coach Vince Lombardi, the Packers built a culture around discipline, execution, and perfection. Lombardi's famous quote, "Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing," defined the era, and on the field, his team backed it up. From 1960 to 1967, Green Bay won 5 NFL championships in 7 years, including the first 2 Super Bowls. They dominated with a style that was simple in concept, but flawless in execution. Lombardi's power sweep became the most iconic play of its time. Everyone knew it was coming, and no one could stop it. The roster was loaded with Hall of Famers. Bart Starr at quarterback, Paul Hornung and Jim Taylor in the backfield, Forrest Gregg and Jerry Kramer on the offensive line, Willie Davis and Ray Nitschke anchoring the defense. They won the 1961 and 1962 titles with suffocating defense and a punishing ground game. They added 3 more championships from 1965 to 1967, capped off with victories in Super Bowl I and II, cementing their place in history. Bart Starr won MVP of both games and became the face of calm excellence in clutch moments. The Packers of the 1960s built the NFL's first true dynasty, and their success set the standard for what greatness in pro football would look like. To this day, the championship trophy bears Lombardi's name, the ultimate symbol of a dynasty that defined an era. San Francisco 49ers, 1981 to 1994. The San Francisco 49ers of the 1980s and early 1990s were the NFL's dynasty of innovation and precision. It began in 1981 when head coach Bill Walsh introduced the West Coast offense, a system that changed football forever. Instead of relying on power running and deep shots, Walsh emphasized short, rhythmic passes to control the game. With Joe Montana at quarterback and Dwight Clark at wide receiver, the 49ers captured their first Super Bowl, sealed by the catch in the NFC Championship against Dallas. From there, they became the league's most complete team. Montana was cool under pressure, earning the nickname Joe Cool. He won 4 Super Bowls and never threw an interception in any of them. Jerry Rice, drafted in 1985, became the most dominant wide receiver in NFL history. Roger Craig, Ronnie Lott, Steve Young, and countless others filled out a roster stacked with Hall of Fame talent. From 1981 to 1994, they won 5 Super Bowls, with Walsh and later George Seifert on the sideline. They appeared in 9 NFC Championship games over that span and set records for offensive efficiency and defensive toughness. By the time Steve Young took over in the 1990s, the dynasty had evolved but remained dominant. In the 1994 season, Young won MVP. Rice had another legendary campaign, and the 49ers captured their 5th Lombardi Trophy in a blowout win over the Chargers. The San Francisco dynasty was built on innovation, consistency, and legendary talent, and they left a blueprint for every modern passing offense in the league. Kansas City Chiefs, 2018 to present. The Kansas City Chiefs are the NFL's current dynasty, built around the most dangerous quarterback-coach duo in the league, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. The run began in 2018, Mahomes' first season as a starter. He threw for over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, instantly winning MVP and announcing that the Chiefs were entering a new era. With Reid's offensive genius and Mahomes' generational talent, Kansas City became the team everyone else had to chase. In 2019, they completed the breakthrough. The Chiefs erased double-digit deficits in 3 straight playoff games, capped by a Super Bowl 54 victory over the 49ers. Mahomes was named Super Bowl MVP, and Kansas City had its first title in 50 years. Since then, the dynasty has only grown. The Chiefs have reached 6 straight AFC championship games, won 4 AFC titles, and collected 3 Super Bowls in 5 years: 2019, 2022, 2023. Mahomes has added 2 MVP awards and 3 Super Bowl MVP to his resume, while tight end Travis Kelce has become one of the greatest playoff performers in history. What makes this dynasty unique is adaptability. They won early with explosive big play offenses, then transitioned to a more patient, methodical style when defenses adjusted. Even in seasons where they lost stars like Tyreek Hill, they found ways to win. Reid's creativity, Mahomes' playmaking, and a steadily improving defense have kept them at the top. The Chiefs are still in their prime, and with Mahomes only in his late 20s, the dynasty shows no signs of slowing down. Right now, Kansas City is building a run that could rival any dynasty in NFL history. Dallas Cowboys, 1991 to 1995. The Dallas Cowboys of the early 1990s were built like a machine, and for a 5-year stretch, nobody could stop them. After years of decline in the 1980s, the Cowboys rebuilt under head coach Jimmy Johnson and owner Jerry Jones. The foundation was the triplets: quarterback Troy Aikman, running back Emmitt Smith, and wide receiver Michael Irvin. Add in an elite offensive line led by Larry Allen, Eric Williams, and Mark Tuney, plus a relentless defense anchored by Charles Haley and Darren Woodson, and Dallas became the NFL's most complete team. From 1991 to 1995, the Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years and posted 4 straight NFC championship appearances. They dominated with balance: Emmitt Smith's power running, Aikman's efficiency, Irvin's big playability, and a defense that thrived in big moments. Their peak came in Super Bowl 28, when Smith capped off an MVP season with a legendary postseason run, carrying the offense through injuries and pressure. He remains the NFL's all-time leading rusher, a testament to his consistency. The dynasty wasn't without drama. Jimmy Johnson left after back-to-back championships in a power struggle with Jerry Jones, and Barry Switzer took over. Even with that shift, the talent was too overwhelming to slow down, and Dallas added another Lombardi trophy in 1995. By the late 1990s, age, free agency, and off-field distractions tore the dynasty apart. But for the first half of the decade, the Cowboys were the NFL's standard. Oakland, Los Angeles Raiders, 1967 to 1985. The Raiders of the late 1960s through the mid-1980s built one of the NFL's most unique dynasties, a team defined by toughness, swagger, and a rebellious identity. Under owner Al Davis, the Raiders lived by the motto, "Just win, baby." And during this era, they did exactly that. From 1967 to 1985, the Raiders posted 16 straight winning seasons, won 3 Super Bowls, and became one of the league's most feared franchises. It started with the AFL-NFL merger. Led by quarterback Darryl LaMonica, Oakland reached Super Bowl II in 1967. By the 1970s, the team was stacked with talent: Ken Stabler, Fred Biletnikoff, and Dave Casper. On defense, names like Jack Tatum, Ted Hendricks, and Howie Long struck fear into opponents. The Raiders won their first Super Bowl in the 1976 season, knocking off the Minnesota Vikings in dominant fashion. Their next title came in 1980 with quarterback Jim Plunkett, a reclamation project who led the Raiders to become the first wild-card team to ever win the Super Bowl. In 1982, the team relocated to Los Angeles, and it didn't take long for them to win again. Powered by running back Marcus Allen, the Raiders crushed Washington in Super Bowl XVIII, highlighted by Allen's 74-yard touchdown run that remains one of the most iconic plays in NFL history. The Raiders' dynasty wasn't built on polish. It was built on intimidation, risk-taking, and a culture that embraced cast-offs and turned them into stars. They weren't always the NFL's most consistent team, but from the late 60s to the mid-80s, they were always dangerous. The Raiders became more than a team. They were a cultural force, embodying toughness, individuality, and the idea that winning forgives everything. Dallas Cowboys, 1970 to 1979. The Dallas Cowboys of the 1970s were the NFL's first modern dynasty, combining innovation, star power, and consistency at a level no other team matched in that decade. Led by head coach Tom Landry, the Cowboys were built on balance. Landry's trademark fedora and stoic presence on the sideline became iconic, but his real genius was schematic. His flex defense and innovative offensive systems put Dallas ahead of the league strategically. The roster was loaded. Roger Staubach became the franchise quarterback, earning the nickname Captain Comeback for his poise in big moments. On offense, he had weapons like Drew Pearson, Tony Dorsett, and Bob Hayes, the Olympic sprinter who stretched defenses vertically. On defense, the Doomsday Defense featured Randy White, Ed Too Tall Jones, Mel Renfro, and Harvey Martin, a unit that could dominate games on its own. The Cowboys appeared in 5 Super Bowls during the 1970s, winning 2 championships, Super Bowl VI and Super Bowl XII. They were also the first team to appear in 7 NFC championship games in a single decade. More than wins, though, Dallas became America's team. Their games were nationally televised, their players became household names, and their cheerleaders and star logo became symbols of the NFL itself. The dynasty didn't win every Super Bowl, but their consistency was unmatched. From 1970 to 1979, they were always in the conversation, and they built the identity of the Cowboys franchise that still carries weight today. Washington football team, 1982 to 1991. In the 1980s, Washington built one of the NFL's most underrated dynasties, a team that thrived on depth, toughness, and adaptability. Led by head coach Joe Gibbs, Washington won 3 Super Bowls in 10 years, each with a different starting quarterback. Joe Theismann in 1982, Doug Williams in 1987, and Mark Rypien in 1991. No other franchise has ever done that, a testament to Gibbs' system and the balance of his roster. The foundation of the dynasty was the offensive line, known as the Hogs. Russ Grimm, Joe Jacoby, Mark May, Jeff Bostic, and others dominated the trenches, giving Washington a physical identity that wore down defenses. Behind them, running backs like John Riggins, Ernest Biner, and Gerald Riggs punished opponents, while receivers like Art Monk, Gary Clark, and Ricky Sanders gave the offense explosive balance. Defensively, Washington was built on toughness and opportunism. Players like Darrell Green, one of the fastest corners ever, and Charles Mann kept the unit strong even as rosters turned over. Each championship team looked different. In 1982, it was Riggins carrying the load during a strike-shortened season. In 1987, Doug Williams became the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl, throwing 4 touchdowns in 1 quarter of the big game. And in 1991, the team went 14-2 and steamrolled through the playoffs, often called one of the most complete teams of all time. From 1982 to 1991, Washington wasn't always flashy, but they were consistently among the best. 3 Lombardi trophies in a decade put them firmly in the NFL's dynasty club. Miami Dolphins, 1970 to 1974. The Miami Dolphins of the early 1970s built one of the NFL's shortest but most perfect dynasties. Head coach Don Shula arrived in 1970, bringing discipline and structure to a young franchise. Within 3 years, he turned them into champions. Powered by a dominant ground game, an unshakable defense, and smart, efficient quarterback play, the Dolphins won back-to-back Super Bowls in 1972 and 1973. Their 1972 team remains unmatched in league history, the only team to ever complete a perfect season, finishing 17-0. Quarterbacks Bob Grease and backup Earl Morrall managed the offense, while the no-name defense, led by Nick Buonaconti and Manny Fernandez, smothered opponents. On the ground, Larry Csonka, Jim Kick, and Mercury Morris formed the most punishing rushing trio the league had ever seen. The following year, they proved it wasn't a fluke. In 1973, Miami went 12-2 and won another Super Bowl, this time in dominant fashion, outscoring their playoff opponents, 85-33. Csonka earned Super Bowl MVP, and Shula cemented his legacy as one of the greatest coaches of all time. By 1974, the run had ended, but not before Miami had established itself as one of the league's greatest dynasties. 2 Super Bowls, 3 straight AFC titles, and a perfect season that still stands alone. The Miami Dolphins of the early 70s were efficient, physical, and unbeatable at their peak. Their perfection is why this dynasty is still celebrated today. Chicago Bears, 1940s. The Chicago Bears of the 1940s were the NFL's first true dynasty, a team that shaped the league's identity in its early years. Led by legendary head coach George Halas, the Bears were built on physicality and innovation. Halas embraced new strategies, including the T formation, which used a balanced offensive line and a quarterback under center, a design that revolutionized football. With Sid Luckman at quarterback, the system became unstoppable. The dominance showed up in the championships. From 1940 to 1946, the Bears won 4 NFL titles: 1940, 1941, 1943, 1946, and appeared in 5 title games overall. Their 1940 NFL championship win over Washington still stands as one of the most lopsided games ever, a 73-0 blowout that remains the largest margin of victory in league history. The roster was stacked with Hall of Famers. Luckman was the league's first great passing quarterback. Bronco Nagurski and George McAfee brought power and speed to the backfield. Bulldog Turner anchored the defense, while players like Danny Fortman and Clyde Bulldog Turner gave Chicago a complete team on both sides of the ball. Their style of play made the forward pass a bigger weapon, and their defensive toughness set the tone for what Chicago would be known for decades later: the Monsters of the Midway. The 1940s, Bears laid the foundation for the modern NFL Cleveland Browns, 1946 to 1955. The Cleveland Browns of the late 1940s and early 1950s were one of the most dominant dynasties in professional football history, even if they're sometimes overlooked today. Led by head coach Paul Brown, the team was revolutionary in its approach. Brown introduced modern concepts like film study, playbooks, and full-time assistant coaches, innovations that reshaped football forever. On the field, his teams were disciplined, organized, and ahead of their time. The centerpiece was quarterback Otto Graham, who may be the most underrated winner in NFL history. With Graham under center, the Browns reached the championship game in all 10 seasons he played, winning 7 titles between the AAFC and NFL. He could run, he could pass, and he was the perfect leader for Brown's structured system. The dynasty began in the AAFC, All-America Football Conference, where the Browns won all 4 league titles from 1946 to 1949. When the league folded, skeptics doubted how Cleveland would fare against established NFL powers. They answered immediately by winning the NFL championship in their very first season, 1950. Over the next 5 years, they kept returning to the title game, winning 3 more championships: 1950, 1954, 1955. Alongside Graham were stars like Marion Motley, one of the most powerful backs of his era, and Lou Groza, the Hall of Fame tackle and kicker known as the Toe. Their record of sustained success, 10 straight championship appearances, has never been matched. Baltimore Colts, 1958 to 1971. The Baltimore Colts carved out one of the NFL's early dynasties, built on toughness, innovation, and one of the greatest quarterbacks in football history. Led by head coach Weeb Ewbank and quarterback Johnny Unitas, the Colts became national icons in 1958 with their sudden death overtime win over the New York Giants in the NFL championship game. Often called the greatest game ever played, it was the first nationally televised NFL title and is credited with sparking the league's surge in popularity. The Colts backed it up the next year, winning another championship in 1959. Unitas, with his cool leadership and rocket arm, revolutionized the passing game. He thrived with weapons like Raymond Berry, who set standards for route running and precision, and Lenny Moore, a versatile threat who could run or catch with equal danger. By the mid-1960s, the Colts transitioned to a new coach in Don Shula, who kept them among the league's elite. They went 13-1 in 1968, behind quarterback Earl Morrall, winning the NFL championship before suffering a stunning upset to the Jets in Super Bowl III, a loss that reshaped the NFL's image of the AFL. But the dynasty wasn't finished. In 1970, with Unitas still in the mix and a dominant defense, the Colts rebounded to win Super Bowl V in a slugfest against the Dallas Cowboys. It marked the franchise's second official NFL title of the modern era and cemented their place in history. From 1958 through 1971, the Colts were a fixture at the top of the league. They produced legendary players, helped usher pro football into the television age, and left a lasting mark as one of the NFL's most important dynasties. St. Louis Rams, 1999 to 2001. Few dynasties burned as brightly, or as quickly, as the St. Louis Rams at the turn of the millennium. The story began in 1999 when an unknown backup quarterback named Kurt Warner stepped in after Trent Green's injury. Surrounded by talent, Warner ran an offense that instantly became legendary, the greatest show on turf. With Marshall Faulk in the backfield, Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt out wide, and an aggressive Mike Martz passing system, the Rams redefined what offensive football could look like. Warner threw for 4,353 yards and 41 touchdowns that season. Faulk won Offensive Player of the Year, and St. Louis finished 13-3. They capped it with a Super Bowl 34 win over the Titans, remembered for the tackle. Mike Jones stopping Kevin Dyson 1 yard short of the goal line as time expired. In 2000, the offense somehow got even better, scoring 540 points, but defensive struggles kept them from repeating. In 2001, the Rams roared back, going 14-2 and reaching another Super Bowl. Warner won his second MVP, Faulk won his third straight Offensive Player of the Year, and the Rams seemed unstoppable. But in the Super Bowl, they were stunned by the New England Patriots in Tom Brady's first championship run. It marked the end of their peak. Injuries, roster changes, and defensive regression quickly brought the run to a close. From 1999 to 2001, though, the Rams revolutionized football. Their speed, precision, and creativity made them must-watch TV, and their impact on modern spread offenses is still felt today. The greatest show on turf wasn't the longest dynasty, but for 3 years, it was the most electrifying in NFL history. Packers versus Bears. This is the NFL's oldest rivalry. It started in 1921, and over 200 games later, it still feels personal. The Packers and Bears are the two oldest franchises in NFL history. Both are cornerstone teams from the league's early days, and they've hated each other ever since. From George Halas and Curly Lambeau, to Brett Favre and Brian Urlacher, to Aaron Rodgers screaming, "I own you" at Soldier Field. This rivalry has spanned generations. The Bears dominated early, but Green Bay's decades of quarterback supremacy flipped the script, especially in the Favre and Rodgers eras, when the Packers won 40 of 58 meetings between 1992 and 2022. No matter their records, when these two play, it matters. It's not just about football, it's about pride, it's about legacy, and even with the Bears trying to rebuild and the Packers turning to Jordan Love, nothing gets the Midwest fired up like Packers versus Bears. Ravens versus Steelers, the most violent rivalry in the NFL. Ravens versus Steelers isn't about tradition or geography. It's about pain. Since the late 90s, these two AFC North bullies have built a rivalry on defense, disrespect, and downright brutality. The 2000s turned it into must-watch TV. You had Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and Terrell Suggs going head-to-head with Troy Polamalu, James Harrison, and Hines Ward. Every play felt like a car crash. Every hit could end a season. They've met multiple times in the playoffs, and each was an absolute slugfest. One-possession games, brawls, trash talk. The respect is real, but so is the hatred. These teams are mirror images. Smash-mouth football, elite defenses, passionate fan bases. And it doesn't matter who's under center, whether it was Roethlisberger versus Flacco or Lamar versus Pickett. When these teams line up, you know you're in for war. This is the grittiest, meanest rivalry the NFL has. Cowboys versus Eagles. This one's personal. Cowboys versus Eagles isn't just a divisional clash. It's a culture war. Dallas calls itself America's team. Flashy. Philadelphia, blue collar, gritty. And they hate that slogan with a passion. These fan bases are oil and water. Cowboys fans roll deep, even into Philly, and Eagles fans greet them with batteries, snowballs, and verbal warfare. Literally. Cowboys fans have gotten jumped in the parking lot. On the field, it's had everything. Roger Staubach versus Ron Jaworski. Tony Romo versus Donovan McNabb. The Cowboys putting up 51 on the Eagles in 2022. They've traded division titles, ruined each other's playoff hopes, and never, ever missed a chance to throw shade. Even when they're both bad, the hate stays high. But when they're both good, it becomes must-see chaos. Cowboys versus 49ers. This is the rivalry that made the NFC. Cowboys versus 49ers isn't about geography. It's about dominance. Two dynasties that collided again and again. In the 1970s, the Cowboys knocked the Niners out of the playoffs back-to-back years. Then, the Niners got their revenge in 1995. In the 90s, they traded NFC championships like heavyweight boxers. Aikman versus Young. Emmett versus Ricky Waters. Irvin versus Jerry Rice. Each game felt like the real Super Bowl. And recently, they've picked up right where they left off. They've met twice in the last 3 postseasons, and the 49ers won both. As of 2025, the all-time series is tied 21-19, Niners lead. This rivalry is about pride. It's two fan bases that think they should be the face of the NFC. Raiders versus Chiefs. This isn't just a rivalry, it's war. Raiders versus Chiefs might be the most hostile rivalry the NFL has ever seen. It started in the old AFL, and from the very beginning, these teams hated each other. In the 1969 AFL Championship, Kansas City beat Oakland to go to the Super Bowl. Raiders owner Al Davis never forgot it. And after the merger, the tension didn't cool down. It got nuclear. From bench-clearing brawls to personal fouls that looked more like criminal charges, these games were violent. And the fans? Let's just say if you're wearing the wrong jersey at Arrowhead or the Coliseum, good luck. Kansas City currently leads the all-time series 75-55-2, and in the last few years, it hasn't even been close. Since Patrick Mahomes took over, the Chiefs have dominated the rivalry. But despite the scoreboard, the hatred never left. The Raiders still view the Chiefs as the enemy. And Chiefs fans? They live to humiliate Las Vegas. Giants versus Eagles. This rivalry is pure NFC East chaos. The New York Giants and Philadelphia Eagles have been beating each other up since 1933. And while the Giants dominated early, the Eagles flipped the script in the modern era. As of June 2025, the Eagles lead the all-time series 96-89, including the playoffs. And lately, it's been all Philly. Since 2014, the Eagles are 17-4 against the Giants. Philly fans love to remind Giants fans about it. And they're ruthless. But the Giants have had their moments too. They ruined the Eagles' playoff hopes in 2006. And in 2010, they were on the wrong side of the miracle at the New Meadowlands, when Deshaun Jackson walked it off with a punt return touchdown that lives in highlight reels forever. Every time they meet, it's a war of attrition between two teams that cannot stand each other, with fan bases that treat a win like a Super Bowl. Jets versus Patriots. This one's personal, especially if you're a Jets fan. The Jets and Patriots have been division rivals since the 1960s. But this rivalry escalated into full-blown hostility during the Tom Brady-Bill Belichick era, and it started with betrayal. In 2000, Bill Belichick resigned as Jets head coach after just 1 day and took the Patriots job instead. Since then, New England has absolutely dominated. The Patriots lead the all-time series 75-56. In fact, the Jets literally went 7 years without beating New England, finally breaking the streak in 2023. But there's more fuel to this fire. In 2007, the Patriots were caught videotaping Jets' defensive signals in the infamous Spygate scandal. Then, in 2010, Rex Ryan and Mark Sanchez stunned the Patriots in the playoffs, upsetting the 14-2 Pats in Foxborough. But the Pats got their revenge. And even without Brady, New England still owns this rivalry. But Jets fans haven't forgotten the pain. Packers versus Vikings. This is one of the most intense rivalries in the NFC North, and it's never been about just football. Packers versus Vikings is a battle of borders and of Midwest bragging rights that spans over 60 years. The Packers lead the all-time series 66-60, but the margin is shrinking. The Vikings have been much more competitive in the last decade, thanks to young superstar Justin Jefferson. It's a clash of styles. The tradition-heavy Packers versus the chaotic yet fiercely loyal fan base of the Vikings. But it's not just about the fans, it's about stolen quarterbacks. In 2009, Brett Favre, the Packers legend, joined the Vikings and torched Green Bay at Lambeau Field. It felt like betrayal. But for Vikings fans, It was one of the greatest moments in team history. In 2020, Dalvin Cook ran wild on the Packers for 226 total yards and 4 touchdowns. In 2022, Justin Jefferson humiliated the Packers' defense with 184 receiving yards in Week 1. But despite the Vikings' highlights, the Packers still hold the edge, especially with Jordan Love's rise in 2024. This rivalry is loud, close, and always personal. 49ers versus Seahawks. This isn't just a rivalry. It's a war that peaked in the 2010s and hasn't cooled off since. The 49ers versus Seahawks rivalry didn't start hot. It took off when Jim Harbaugh and Pete Carroll brought their college beef from Stanford versus USC straight to the NFL. From 2011 to 2014, it was the most physical, emotional, and high-stakes feud in football. The Seahawks' Legion of Boom versus the 49ers' Front Seven, Colin Kaepernick versus Russell Wilson, Frank Gore versus Marshawn Lynch, and it all exploded in the 2013 NFC Championship game. Kaepernick launched a pass to Crabtree in the end zone, and Richard Sherman tipped it, sealing the Seahawks' Super Bowl trip and delivering the now iconic post-game rant. "I'm the best corner in the game. When you try me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're gonna get." The Seahawks lead the all-time series 31-23, but lately, San Francisco's taken over. Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuel lit up the Seahawks in the 2022 wildcard round, winning 41-23. Steelers versus Browns. This is the AFC's oldest rivalry, and one of its most lopsided. The Pittsburgh Steelers and Cleveland Browns have been going at it since 1950, back when leather helmets were still around, and the Browns were dominating the league. In the early days, Cleveland owned Pittsburgh, winning the first 16 matchups straight. But then, the tide turned. Since the 1970s, it's been a Steelers stronghold, and it hasn't let up. Pittsburgh leads the all-time series 82-64. But don't let the record fool you. The hate is real. There's been brawls, ejections, and blood spilled on both sides. Nothing proves it more than Myles Garrett swinging a helmet at Mason Rudolph in 2019, one of the ugliest moments in NFL history. It sparked suspensions, fines, and full-on chaos. This isn't just a division game. It's factory town violence between two cities that live for football. Bears versus Vikings. This one doesn't get as much attention as Packers versus Bears, but don't be fooled. It started in 1961 when the Vikings joined the league and instantly beat the Bears in their first ever game. That set the tone. Over the years, it's been a back-and-forth tug of war. Minnesota leads the all-time series 68-58. The thing is, this rivalry is less about championships and more about who can deliver the colder punch in a frozen December slugfest. There's no real playoff history between them, but that doesn't mean there's no bad blood. From 2000 to 2010, they split the series 11-11 with wild finishes, late-game heroics, and some of the nastiest weather in football. And recently, the Vikings have had the upper hand, winning 6 of the last 8 matchups and looking like the more stable franchise on the field. But make no mistake, the Bears don't forget. This is about division pride, about being the toughest team in the NFC North. Falcons versus Saints. Forget trophies, forget respect. Falcons versus Saints is about pure petty hatred, and it runs deep. This rivalry kicked off in 1967, when both teams were still expansion afterthoughts, but it didn't take long for fans to pick a side and never forgive the other. It's not a flashy matchup to outsiders, but to Atlanta and New Orleans, it's war. The games are always weird, personal, emotional, and usually high-scoring. They've combined for multiple 40-plus point shootouts, blown leads, and heartbreaking finishes. The all-time series 56-56. It doesn't get tighter than that. The most infamous game? Probably 2012, when the Falcons entered 8-0, and the 3-5 Saints handed them their first loss, and then talked trash like they just won the Super Bowl. This rivalry doesn't need playoff stakes, though they did meet in 1991, a Falcons win. Saints fans call the Falcons chokers. Falcons fans call the Saints arrogant. Both think the other city doesn't deserve football. Commanders versus Cowboys. Before the Commanders were the Commanders, this was Cowboys versus Redskins. It all began in 1960, when Cowboys owner Clint Murchison tried to start a team, but needed league approval from one last vote. That vote? George Preston Marshall, owner of Washington's team at the time. He said no, until Murchison bought the rights to the team's fight song, then used it as leverage to force Marshall into agreeing. So yeah, the rivalry started with a business shakedown over a marching band song, and it only got petty from there. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Washington and Dallas were both powerhouses, combining for 8 Super Bowl appearances and 5 wins from 1971 to 1991. The battles were vicious, the crowds were hostile, and the games were season deciders. In 1983, they met in the NFC Championship. Washington won 31-17. In 1992, Dallas returned the favor, blowing past them to start their dynasty. The all-time record, Dallas leads 79-49. Dolphins versus Jets. At first glance, this doesn't look like a rivalry. Miami and New York don't share borders. They don't have deep historical hatred. And yet, this feud has been quietly spiteful for over 50 years. It began in the old AFL, when both teams were still trying to build identities. Then came Joe Namath, Broadway Joe, who gave New York swagger, and Don Shula, who gave Miami excellence. In the 80s and 90s, this matchup became must-watch TV. Why? Because the games were almost always close, and the trash talk was elite. But nothing tops Monday Night 2000. The Dolphins were up 30-7 going into the fourth quarter, and then the Jets pulled off the unthinkable. Vinny Testaverde led 4 touchdown drives in the final quarter, plus a game-tying field goal. They won 40-37 in overtime, in a game now known as the Monday Night Miracle. And in 2008, Brett Favre left the Packers to join the Jets, just in time to face the Dolphins and his successor, Chad Pennington, who had just been cut by the Jets. Pennington got his revenge. Miami beat the Jets in Week 17 and won the division. It's not the loudest rivalry, but it's a rivalry nonetheless. Lions versus Packers. The Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers have been trading blows since 1930. That's nearly a century of history, and it's been mostly one-sided. The Packers have dominated this matchup for decades. Detroit has been their punching bag. But don't get it twisted. The rivalry is real. Why? Because these games matter to the identity of both franchises. Detroit sees Green Bay as the golden child, the team with all the trophies, the legends, the respect. Meanwhile, Green Bay sees Detroit as that little sibling who keeps coming back, no matter how many times they get knocked down. Thanksgiving games, Lambeau blowouts, heartbreak in Week 17, they've had it all. But the Lions finally started fighting back. In 2015, they ended a 24-year losing streak at Lambeau Field. In 2022, they spoiled Aaron Rodgers' final game as a Packer, eliminating Green Bay from playoff contention in the last week of the season. Detroit isn't scared anymore. They're contenders. And every time they face Green Bay now, they play like they've got decades of pain to avenge. Chargers versus Raiders. Few rivalries have the chaos, bitterness, and petty energy of the Chargers versus Raiders. And it spans 4 cities. LA, Oakland, Vegas, and San Diego all got a piece of it. It all started back in the AFL days, where these two teams were constant thorns in each other's cleats. But once the leagues merged, things got even nastier. From Al Davis feuds to helmet-swinging brawls, the Chargers and Raiders never needed much to ignite a war. There have been games where players were ejected before halftime, fans fought in the stands before the national anthem finished. Entire playoff hopes came down to one wild overtime game. You remember it. Week 18, 2021 season. If they tied, both teams would make the playoffs. But the Raiders said screw that, kicked the game winner in overtime, and eliminated the Chargers. Savage. What makes this rivalry extra spicy is the proximity. They both shared SoCal fan bases, and the Raiders, even while in Oakland, always had a massive presence in Los Angeles. Patriots versus Bills. This rivalry used to be one-sided. Actually, no. It used to be humiliating. From 2001 to 2019, the New England Patriots owned the Buffalo Bills. Tom Brady went 32-3 against them. He beat them with backups. He beat them in snowstorms. For almost 2 decades, it felt like the Patriots were playing Madden on rookie difficulty. But then came the shift. Brady left, Allen arrived, and suddenly, the AFC East had a new sheriff. Josh Allen didn't just break the curse, he torched it. From hurdle highlights to playoff blowouts, Allen turned Foxborough into his second home. Remember the 2021 wildcard game? Bills scored on every single drive. No punts, no turnovers. Just straight-up domination. 47-17. It was a revenge movie, and Buffalo was the star. Since then, the rivalry has tightened. The all-time series stands. Patriots lead, 79-51. Buffalo might finally be building their own dynasty. And if they are, there's no sweeter place to start than by stomping the team that stomped them for 20 years. Bengals versus Chiefs. This isn't a classic rivalry built on decades of bad blood. It's new, it's spiteful, and it's already legendary. Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes. Burrowhead, AFC championships, trash talk, late hits, and revenge. It's got everything. The fire ignited in 2021 when the Bengals shocked the world and took down Kansas City twice. Once in the regular season and then again in the AFC championship game, erasing an 18-point deficit. Cincinnati planted their flag. Burrow had never lost to Mahomes, and the Bengals started calling Arrowhead Burrowhead. The Chiefs didn't take it lightly. In 2022, Mahomes, playing on one ankle, threw darts, scrambled, and sealed a 23-20 win in the AFC title game. It was pure football theater. And Travis Kelce's post-game mic drop? You gotta fight for your right. Burrowhead my ass. That went viral. By 2025, the back and forth has only intensified. Mahomes and Burrow are the modern-day Brady and Manning. They're both in their prime. This isn't just a rivalry, it's the future of the league.
New England Patriots, the fallen empire. The Patriots are what happened when you have 2 decades of dominance followed by the harsh reality that dynasties eventually end. For 20 years, they were the final boss of football. Everyone hated them, everyone feared them, and everyone secretly wished they could be them. Now, they're just another team with a fancy stadium and expensive hoodies. They went from, we're going to win the Super Bowl, to, maybe we'll make the playoffs, to, please don't go 0-17. It's like watching Batman become regular Bruce Wayne, except Bruce Wayne forgot how to throw a football. The Pats built a culture of excellence, then watched Tom Brady take it to Tampa Bay like he was moving out after a messy divorce. Buffalo Bills, the Heartbreakers. The Bills are the most lovable team in football, which is exactly why they'll break your heart in ways you didn't think were possible. They've got the most passionate fans, the coldest weather, and a quarterback who looks like he was built in a Wyoming laboratory to throw footballs through hurricanes. Josh Allen is basically Paul Bunyan with a rocket arm, and Bills Mafia treats every game day like it's the last day on Earth. They jump through tables, tailgate in blizzards, and believe in this team with a religious devotion that would make cult leaders jealous. But here's the thing, they're cursed. 4 straight Super Bowl losses in the 90s wasn't just bad luck. It was a cosmic joke that apparently hasn't ended yet. Miami Dolphins, the tease. The Dolphins are like that friend who's always about to get their life together. They've got speed, they got style, they play in paradise, and somehow they still find ways to make you wonder what could have been. They're fast enough to score 70 points one week and inconsistent enough to lose to the Jets the next. Tua throws dimes when he's healthy, which is about as often as Miami gets snow. The defense is either elite or invisible, depending on whether you're watching highlights or the actual game. Miami is the team that makes you believe in the regular season and remember why hope is dangerous in the playoffs. New York Jets, the tragedy. This franchise exists to teach the rest of the NFL what not to do, like a cautionary tale with shoulder pads and chronic disappointment. They finally get Aaron Rodgers, arguably the most talented quarterback in football, and he gets hurt 4 plays into the season. It's not just bad luck, that's the football gods personally intervening to keep the Jets from having nice things. Jets fans don't watch games expecting to win, they watch games expecting new and creative ways to lose. It's not fandom, it's performance art about suffering. Pittsburgh Steelers, the blue-collar dynasty. The Steelers don't rebuild, they reload. They don't chase trends, they are the trend. They don't fire coaches, they retire them after 47 years of service. This is the most stable franchise in sports, run like a family business, where the family business is winning football games. They draft players, develop them, and keep them forever. They find linebackers in coal mines and turn them into Hall of Famers. Their defense hits harder than a Pennsylvania winter, and their fans treat terrible towels like family heirlooms. Baltimore Ravens, the defensive masterpiece. The Ravens are what happens when you build a franchise around hitting people really, really hard. This team treats defense like a religion and treats running the ball like a sacred ritual passed down through generations. Lamar Jackson is a human highlight reel who plays quarterback like he's playing backyard football with his cousins, except his cousins are 300-pound defensive ends who want to end his career. The Ravens' offense is beautiful chaos. You never know if they're about to score a touchdown or turn the ball over, and sometimes both on the same play. Baltimore football is poetry in motion, if poetry involved a lot more concussions and trash talking. Cincinnati Bengals, the sleeping giant. The Bengals spent decades being the NFL's lovable losers, the team with the cool helmets and absolutely nothing else going for them. They were content being mediocre, like that student who's happy with C's because at least they're not failing. Then Joe Burrow showed up looking like a GQ model who moonlights as a franchise quarterback. Cool, calm, confident, wearing sunglasses like he's about to steal your girlfriend and your playoff hopes. Suddenly, the Bengals have swagger, expectations, and a fan base that remembers what hope feels like. They're no longer the cute underdog. They're the team that nobody wants to play in January. Cleveland Browns, the eternal project. The Browns are proof that hope is the cruelest emotion in sports. This franchise has been rebuilding for longer than some players have been alive. They've had more quarterbacks than some teams have had seasons, and somehow their fans keep showing up like football masochists. Cleveland fans don't just support their team, they survive it. Every season starts with optimism and ends with trauma therapy. They've been through 0-16, the drive, the fumble, and the move, yet somehow they're still here, still believing that maybe this year will be different. Indianapolis Colts, the quarterback factory. The Colts had Peyton Manning for 14 years, then immediately drafted Andrew Luck. That's like winning the lottery twice. Except Andrew Luck decided he'd rather be happier than rich and retired at 29 to go read books, or whatever normal people do. Now they're stuck in quarterback purgatory, cycling through veterans and rookies like they're trying to find the right flavor of disappointment. The Colts are built to win with an elite quarterback, but elite quarterbacks apparently don't want to play in Indianapolis anymore. They've got everything you need to contend, except the most important thing, someone to throw the ball to all those talented receivers they keep drafting. Houston Texans, the resurrection. The Texans went from expansion team to playoff contender to complete dumpster fire to sudden contender again, all in about 20 years. That's impressive commitment to chaos. They've survived the Deshaun Watson drama, the Bill O'Brien era, and somehow emerged with CJ Stroud, who plays quarterback like he's been doing it his whole life instead of just since college. The Texans are young, fast, and suddenly dangerous, which is terrifying for everyone else in the division. Houston football is back, and this time, they might actually know what they're doing. Jacksonville Jaguars, the tropical chaos. The Jags are what happen when you put an NFL team in a city that feels more like a vacation destination than a football town. They play half their games in London because apparently even their own team wants to travel. Trevor Lawrence looks like a Disney prince who accidentally wandered into the NFL, and somehow he's turning the franchise from a punchline into a legitimate threat. The stadium has swimming pools, because why wouldn't it? This is Florida. Everything's weird here. Jacksonville is chaos theory with shoulder pads, and somehow it's starting to work. Tennessee Titans, the grinders. The Titans play football like they're building a house, methodically, efficiently, and with way more running than anyone wants to watch. They're not flashy, they're not fun, but they're tough as nails and harder to kill than a cockroach. This team believes in defense, running the ball, and winning ugly. They'll beat you 16-13 and act like they just won the Super Bowl. Their idea of an explosive play is a 12-yard run up the middle on 3rd and 9. Tennessee football isn't entertainment. It's work. Blue collar, lunch pail. Please God, can we throw the ball more than 15 times work? Kansas City Chief, the Golden Boys. The Chief are what happens when you combine elite talent, perfect coaching, and Taylor Swift occasionally showing up to games. Patrick Mahomes plays quarterback like he's playing a video game with cheat codes enabled, making throws that shouldn't be physically possible. Then they got Travis Kelce, who's somehow both the best tight end in football and the most famous boyfriend in America. They got Andy Reid, who calls plays like he's conducting a symphony of destruction. And they got fans who show up in below zero weather and make Arrowhead Stadium sound like a jet engine. The Chiefs are the new Patriots, except they're actually likable. For now. Las Vegas Raiders, the Outlaws. The Raiders moved to Vegas because, of course they did. This franchise has always been about chaos, rebellion, and making questionable decisions that somehow work out. They play in a city built on gambling and bad choices. It's perfect. The Raiders fans are a cult. People get Raiders tattoos before they get married. They wear team gear to funerals. They name their children after former players from the 1970s. This isn't fandom. This is a lifestyle that requires commitment and possibly therapy. Win or lose, the Raiders are always entertaining. Usually lose, but always entertaining. Los Angeles Chargers, the forgotten. The Chargers moved from San Diego to LA and immediately became the least popular team in their own city. Their home games look like neutral site games because nobody in LA cares about a team that abandoned their actual fans. They got Justin Herbert, who throws perfect spirals like he's trying to thread needles from 40 yards away. They've got talent, they've got potential, and they've got a fan base that's spread across 2 cities and mostly consists of people who feel bad for them. The Chargers are the most talented team that nobody talks about, playing in the most expensive stadium that they don't really belong in. Denver Broncos, the fallen horses. The Broncos used to be the gold standard of AFC football. Elway, Manning, championship defense, mile-high magic. They paid Russell Wilson $245 million to throw checkdowns and suddenly became the most expensive mediocre team in football. Denver fans still show up like it's 2015 and like they've got the best defense in football. They wear orange like it's armor and talk about attitude like it's a secret weapon. They're waiting for the next great quarterback to save them, which is basically the Denver way of life. The Broncos are proof that even proud franchises can become cautionary tales about guaranteed contracts. Dallas Cowboys, America's most polarizing team. The Cowboys call themselves America's team, but half of America only watches them hoping they'll lose. Jerry Jones has owned this team for 30 years and hasn't won a Super Bowl since grunge music was popular. They've got talent, they got star power, they've got the most expensive stadium on earth, and somehow they still find ways to disappoint everyone, especially themselves. Dak Prescott plays like an MVP in September and a backup quarterback in January. Cowboy fans live in a constant state of delusion, convinced that this year will be different, despite all the evidence suggesting otherwise. Philadelphia Eagles, the psychos. Eagle fans are the only people who would boo Santa Claus and somehow make it seem reasonable. The Eagles won their first Super Bowl in 2017, and the city celebrated like they discovered fire. Fans climbed light poles, flipped cars, and probably tried to adopt Nick Foles. This isn't normal fan behavior. This is Philadelphia fan behavior, which is its own category of human experience. New York Giants, the Little Giants. The Giants are football aristocracy in New York, which means they carry themselves with dignity, even when they're losing by 30 points. They don't chase trends or make flashy moves. They just quietly exist, and occasionally remember that they used to be really good. They beat Tom Brady in 2 Super Bowls with Eli Manning, who looked like he accidentally wandered onto a football field and decided to stay. The Giants do everything the right way, which apparently means being respectable and boring until suddenly they're not. New York Giants football is like classical music, sophisticated, traditional, and occasionally brilliant when you're not expecting it. Washington Commanders, the rebrand. The Commanders spent decades being run by the worst owner in sports, which is saying something in a league that includes Jerry Jones. Dan Snyder turned this proud franchise into a national punchline before finally selling the team to someone who might actually care about football. They changed their name, changed their owner, and now they're trying to change their culture. Washington fans have been through so much trauma that hope feels foreign, like a language they used to speak but forgot. The Commanders are starting over, which honestly might be the best thing that could happen to them. Green Bay Packers, the small town dreamers. The Packers are owned by the people of Green Bay, Wisconsin, which makes them the most socialist franchise in America's most capitalist sport. They play in the smallest city in the NFL and somehow attract Hall of Fame quarterbacks like they're giving away free cheese. Aaron Rodgers left, but they immediately found Jordan Love, because apparently Green Bay grows quarterbacks in the frozen tundra like other places grow corn. Packers fans wear cheese on their heads and act like this is normal behavior. In Green Bay, it probably is. The Packers are proof that you don't need a big city to have big dreams, just really good scouting and a lot of faith in the power of Wisconsin. Chicago Bears, the defensive traditionalists. The Bears invented modern defense and have been trying to recreate 1985 ever since. They draft running backs like they're collecting Pokemon cards and treat quarterbacks like necessary evils who shouldn't be trusted with important decisions. Chicago football is about running the ball, hitting people hard, and playing in weather that would make polar bears complain. Bears fans don't want pretty football, they want effective football, preferably involving someone getting tackled so hard they question their life choices. The Bears are old school football in a new school world, which is either charming or frustrating depending on whether you like offense. Detroit Lions, the comeback story. For 60 years, the Lions were the NFL's lovable losers, the team that found new ways to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They were so bad that being a Lions fan was considered a character flaw. Then Dan Campbell showed up, talking about biting kneecaps and playing with heart, and somehow it worked. The Lions became fun, dangerous, and actually good at football, which confused everyone, especially Lions fans who didn't know how to process success. Detroit football is finally something to be proud of instead of something to survive. Minnesota Vikings, the Heartbreak Hotel. The Vikings are the most talented team to never win a Super Bowl, which is both impressive and deeply depressing. They've been close so many times that close has become their brand identity. Kirk Cousins throws perfect passes in meaningless games and questionable passes in important games, which perfectly captures the Viking experience. They've got talent, they got hope, and they got a fan base that has been hurt so many times they expect disappointment, but somehow still believe. Viking football is beautiful suffering, like a Shakespearean tragedy with more purple and fewer sword fights. New Orleans Saints, the party. The Saints play in the Superdome, which doubles as the world's largest indoor party. Drew Brees retired and took the championship window with him, but Saints fans don't care because game day in New Orleans is more than winning. It's about community, culture, and having a really good time regardless of the score. The Saints are proof that football can be fun, even when your team isn't great, as long as you're in the right city with the right attitude. Atlanta Falcons, the haunted. The Falcons live with the ghost of 28-3, the most devastating collapse in Super Bowl history. Every conversation about this team eventually leads back to that game, like a psychological wound that never heals. They've got talent, they've got potential, and they've got fans who desperately want to believe, but can't shake the feeling that disaster is always one play away. Atlanta football is hope mixed with trauma, like PTSD with shoulder pads. The Falcons are trying to build a new identity, but some memories are harder to escape than others. Carolina Panthers, the inconsistent. The Panthers are either really good or really bad, with absolutely no middle ground. They go 15-1 one year and 2-15 the next, like they're allergic to mediocrity in both directions. Bryce Young was supposed to be the franchise savior, but rookie seasons are hard and Carolina is impatient. They change coaches, change systems, and change expectations faster than most people change clothes. The Panthers are a roller coaster disguised as a football team, which is either thrilling or nauseating, depending on your tolerance for chaos. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the borrowed glory. The Bucs spent decades being irrelevant. Then Tom Brady showed up like a superhero in red and pewter and immediately won them a Super Bowl. Now Brady's retired and they're back to figuring out who they are without the greatest quarterback in history. Tampa Bay fans experienced 3 years of elite football and now have to go back to being the regular fans of a regular team, which is like going from driving a Ferrari to riding the bus. The Bucs got their championship, but now they got to figure out how to be good without borrowing greatness from New England. San Francisco 49ers, the perfectionists. The 49ers do everything right, except win Super Bowls. They've got the best coach, the best system, the most talent, and somehow they keep finding ways to fall just short of greatness. Brock Purdy went from Mr. Irrelevant to franchise quarterback, which is either the greatest development story in NFL history or proof that Kyle Shanahan could make anyone look good. Their defense hits like a freight train, and their offense moves like poetry in motion. The 49ers are so close to being perfect that it's almost painful to watch them not quite get there. Seattle Seahawks, the 12th man. The Seahawks have the loudest fans in football, and they want everyone to know it. They went from irrelevant to dynasty to rebuilding, and somehow their fans stayed loud throughout all of it. Russell Wilson left, but Seattle kept winning because apparently the city itself is good at football, not just the players. Seahawks football is about energy, attitude, and making visiting teams uncomfortable from the moment they step off the plane. Los Angeles Rams, the Hollywood team. The Rams moved back to LA, built the most expensive stadium in history, and immediately won a Super Bowl because, of course they did. They don't rebuild, they reload by trading draft picks for proven players like they're playing fantasy football with unlimited money. Matthew Stafford finally got his ring, Aaron Donald got his legacy, and LA got a championship parade that probably cost more than the team's entire payroll. The Rams don't do anything quietly or cheaply. Los Angeles football is entertainment, spectacle, and star power, which is exactly what you would expect from Hollywood's NFL team. Arizona Cardinals, the Desert Wanderers. The Cardinals are the NFL nomads. They played in Chicago, St. Louis, and now Arizona. Like they're constantly searching for a home where they can actually win consistently. They've got moments of brilliance followed by stretches of confusion. Like they can't decide if they want to be good or just exist. Kyler Murray is either the future of the position or a very expensive question mark, depending on which game you watch. Arizona football is potential energy that sometimes becomes kinetic energy, but mostly just stays potential. So there you have it, every NFL team explained in all their chaotic, beautiful, frustrating glory. Some are dynasties, some are disasters, and some are just trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. Choose wisely, because once you pick a team, you're stuck with them through draft busts, coaching changes, and whatever creative new ways they find to break your heart.
Arizona Cardinals, founded 1898. The Cardinals aren't just the oldest NFL franchise. They predate the NFL itself by over 2 decades. The team was originally founded in 1898 in Chicago by a group of neighborhood athletes who played on a sandlot field. Back then, they were called the Morgan Athletic Club, and there was no league, just local competition and loose scheduling. The team changed names shortly after to the Racine Normals, based on the street they played on, Racine Avenue in Chicago. In 1901, they got their first real uniforms, a set of used, faded maroon jerseys from the University of Chicago. When team owner Chris O'Brien saw them, he declared the color wasn't maroon, it was cardinal red. The name stuck. They became the Racine Cardinals, and kept that name when they joined the NFL in 1920 as one of its charter members. They won NFL titles in 1925 and 1947, but struggled with attendance and money in a crowded Chicago market, where the Chicago Bears dominated the spotlight. So in 1960, the Cardinals moved to St. Louis, where they were known as the St. Louis Cardinals, sharing the name with the city's baseball team. They stayed in St. Louis for nearly 3 decades, but never found long-term success. In 1988, the team relocated again, this time to Phoenix, Arizona, and eventually rebranded in 1994 as the Arizona Cardinals to represent the entire state. Chicago Bears, founded 1919. The Chicago Bears trace their roots back to 1919, when they were founded by the A.E. Staley Company, a starch manufacturer in Decatur, Illinois. The team was originally known as the Decatur Staleys, and they were created as a company-sponsored squad, part athletic club, part public relations tool. But this wasn't a beer league operation. They paid their players and took football seriously from day one. In 1920, the Staleys joined the newly formed American Professional Football Association, the league that would become the NFL in 1922. The team was managed and coached by a 25-year-old named George Halas, a former University of Illinois standout and Navy veteran. He quickly became the face of the franchise, and later the league itself. In 1921, Halas convinced the Staley Company to let him move the team to Chicago. As part of the deal, he kept the name Staley's for 1 more year, and then rebranded in 1922 as the Chicago Bears. The name was a nod to the city's baseball team, the Cubs. Halas figured if the Cubs played baseball, the bigger, rougher Bears should play football. From there, the Bears became a cornerstone of the NFL. They won their first league title in 1921, then added 8 more championships before the Super Bowl era. They were known for hard-nosed, ground-and-pound football, exemplified by the legendary Bronco Nagurski, and later by the revolutionary T-formation offense, which Halas helped pioneer in the 1940s. Under Halas, the Bears became a dynasty and helped stabilize the NFL during its early, volatile years. Halas coached the team for 40 seasons, won 324 games, and left behind a legacy that still shapes the league. Green Bay Packers, founded 1919. The team was founded in 1919 by Curly Lambeau and George Calhoun, 2 former high school teammates who wanted to start a semi-pro team in their hometown of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Lambeau worked for the Indian Packing Company, which agreed to fund the team with $500 for uniforms and equipment. In exchange, the team would be named after the company. That's how the name Packers was born. In 1921, the Packers joined the NFL. They were almost immediately kicked out for using college players illegally, but were reinstated the same year, marking the true beginning of what would become the 3rd oldest franchise in the league. The Packers faced unique challenges. Green Bay was, and still is, the smallest market in major professional sports. Most early NFL teams were folding or relocating to larger cities, But the Packers survived thanks to something no other team had: community ownership. In 1923, the team was reorganized as a nonprofit, publicly owned corporation, funded by local fans and businesses. That model still exists today, with over 500,000 shareholders who collectively own the team. It's the only structure of its kind in American sports. Under Curly Lambeau, the Packers became a powerhouse in the 1920s and 30s, winning 6 NFL championships. In the 1960s, under legendary coach Vince Lombardi, they added 5 more, including victories in the first 2 Super Bowls. Their home stadium, Lambeau Field, opened in 1957 and is now considered hallowed ground, a symbol of tradition, loyalty, and frigid playoff games. New York Giants, founded 1925. In the early 1920s, professional football was still considered second class compared to the college game. Most NFL teams were based in small towns like Canton or Rock Island. The league knew that to grow, it needed a presence in the country's biggest city, New York. So in 1925, the NFL awarded a franchise to Tim Mara, a bookmaker and businessman who had never even seen a football game. The price? Just $500, roughly $8,000 in today's money. He named the team the New York Giants, borrowing the name from the city's already established baseball team, a common move back then. But unlike many startup franchises that folded quickly, Mara's Giants gave the NFL credibility. They were the league's first big market team, and their success helped professional football shed its backwater image. The team played its first season at the Polo Grounds in Manhattan and quickly built a following. By 1927, they won their first NFL championship, and in the 1930s and 40s, they became a consistent powerhouse, appearing in 8 championship games before the Super Bowl era. Owned by the Mara family for 4 generations, the Giants are one of only a few franchises that have remained in the same city with the same name since their founding. Detroit Lions, founded 1930. The Detroit Lions weren't always Detroit's team. They were born as a small-town franchise in Portsmouth, Ohio. In 1930, a group of businessmen founded the Portsmouth Spartans, a scrappy team in a working-class river town with a population under 50,000. Despite their size, the Spartans held their own against bigger city franchises, even finishing second in the league in 1932. That 1932 season ended in a moment that changed NFL history. The Spartans faced the Bears in a postseason showdown at Chicago Stadium, indoors, on an 80-yard field, with dirt and hash marks drawn in chalk. It was the first NFL playoff game, and it led the league to adopt divisional play and a formal championship game starting the following season. But the Great Depression hit small-town teams hard. Portsmouth couldn't financially sustain a pro team, and in 1934, the franchise was bought by Detroit radio executive George A. Richards and moved to Detroit. They were renamed the Lions to align with the Detroit Tigers baseball team, and because, as Richards put it, a lion is the king of the jungle, and we hope to be the kings of the NFL. The move paid off quickly. In their first season in Detroit, the Lions went 10-3 and became a marquee team. They also established one of the NFL's most enduring traditions, the Thanksgiving Day game, which started in 1934 as a promotional idea by Richards, and still continues today. Washington Commanders, founded 1932. In 1932, the NFL granted a franchise to George Preston Marshall, a successful laundry businessman in Boston. He named the team the Boston Braves, and they shared a stadium and a name with the city's baseball team. But in 1933, the football team moved to Fenway Park, home of the Red Sox. To avoid confusion and carve out its own identity, Marshall renamed the team the Boston Redskins. He kept the Native American branding and hired Lone Star Dietz, who claimed Native ancestry, as head coach, a controversial decision that would spark debate for decades. Despite some early success, including the 1936 NFL championship game, Boston fans didn't embrace the team. Poor attendance and a strained relationship with the city pushed Marshall to move the franchise in 1937 to Washington, D.C., where it immediately found a fan base and a fresh start. The team's first season in Washington was a dream. Rookie quarterback Sammy Baugh led them to an NFL championship in 1937 and another in 1942. Over the next few decades, Washington became one of the NFL's most popular teams, especially during the televised boom of the 1970s and 80s. Under head coach Joe Gibbs, they won 3 Super Bowls, solidifying their reputation as a powerhouse franchise. However, the team's original name and imagery became increasingly controversial. After decades of protest, mounting public pressure, and sponsor backlash, the organization officially retired the Redskins name in 2020. They played 2 seasons as the Washington Football Team, and in 2022, rebranded as the Washington Commanders. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Pittsburgh Steelers, founded 1933. The Pittsburgh Steelers were born in 1933, but not under that name. That year, Pennsylvania finally legalized professional football, allowing the NFL to expand into the state. Art Rooney, a local boxing promoter and businessman, paid $2,500 for a franchise and named the team the Pittsburgh Pirates, after the city's popular baseball team. But success didn't come quickly. For the first 7 years, the Pirates were one of the worst teams in the league, cycling through coaches, struggling to find talent, and finishing with a losing record every season. The turning point came in 1940, when Rooney renamed the team the Steelers, a nod to Pittsburgh's identity as the steel capital of the world. World War II caused player shortages, so the Steelers were forced to merge with other teams just to field a roster. In 1943, they became the Steagles after temporarily joining with the Eagles. In 1944, they merged again, this time with the Chicago Cardinals, forming a short-lived and historically terrible team known unofficially as Card Pit. The post-war years were rocky, but the Steelers slowly began to find their footing. Still, it wasn't until the 1970s that the franchise transformed into a powerhouse. Under head coach Chuck Noll, Pittsburgh built a dynasty. They drafted legends like Terry Bradshaw, Joe Green, Franco Harris, Mel Blount, Jack Lambert, and Lynn Swann, and won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. Philadelphia Eagles, founded 1933. In 1931, the NFL's Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, a team based in Northeast Philadelphia, folded due to financial struggles and a stadium fire. 2 years later, in 1933, the NFL wanted to re-establish a presence in the city, so it awarded a new franchise to Pennsylvania businessmen Bert Bell and Lud Ray for $2,500. That team became the Philadelphia Eagles, named after the Blue Eagle, a symbol of the National Recovery Administration, a New Deal program launched during the Great Depression. The name was a nod to American resilience and rebirth. Like many early NFL franchises, the Eagles got off to a rough start. They didn't record a winning season until 1943, and during World War II, they were temporarily merged with the Pittsburgh Steelers to form the Steagles due to league-wide player shortages. The real breakthrough came in the late 1940s. With head coach Greasy Neal and Hall of Fame running back Steve Van Buren, the Eagles won back-to-back NFL championships in 1948 and 1949, including a 1948 title game played in a blizzard. The only score came from a Van Buren touchdown. The Eagles became known for their gritty style, loyal fan base, and defensive identity, traits that still define the franchise today. They moved into Franklin Field, then Veterans Stadium, and later Lincoln Financial Field. But the passion in the stands never changed. It took nearly 60 more years to win another title, but in 2017, the Eagles captured their first Super Bowl, completing a story that started nearly a century earlier with a symbol of hope during America's hardest times. Cleveland Browns, founded 1946. In 1944, Cleveland businessman Arthur Mickey McBride secured the rights to a new pro football team in the upstart All-America Football Conference, AAFC, a league created to rival the NFL. To build his franchise, McBride hired a young, no-nonsense coach from Ohio State, Paul Brown, and that decision changed football history. Brown brought a revolutionary approach to the game. He introduced things we now take for granted: film study, playbooks, scouting departments, and full-time coaching staffs. He ran the Browns like a machine, and in their very first season in 1946, they went 12-2 and won the AAFC championship. They didn't stop there. The Browns won 4 straight AAFC titles, with stars like Otto Graham and Marion Motley. They were so dominant that when the AAFC folded in 1949, the NFL had no choice but to absorb them, even though many owners feared they were too good. The Browns joined the NFL in 1950 and immediately proved the doubters wrong by winning the NFL championship in their very first season, beating the Rams in a thriller. Throughout the 1950s and early 60s, the Browns remained one of the league's top teams. Paul Brown eventually clashed with ownership and was fired in 1963, but his blueprint stayed in place. In 1964, with Jim Brown at running back, one of the greatest players of all time, Cleveland won another NFL championship, still their last title to this day. The team moved to the new AFC after the 1970 NFL-AFL merger, but the most dramatic moment in franchise history came in 1995, when owner Art Modell controversially moved the team to Baltimore. The NFL suspended operations for the Browns, but promised the city the name, colors, and history would remain. In 1999, the Browns were officially reactivated as an expansion franchise, picking up where they left off, with one of the most loyal, passionate fan bases in the league, San Francisco 49ers, founded 1946. The San Francisco 49ers were the first major professional sports franchise based on the West Coast, and their story begins in the post-World War II boom of 1946. Founded by lumber magnate Tony Morabito, the team was created to bring pro football to a region that had been largely ignored by the major leagues. Morabito had long believed that the NFL needed a West Coast presence. After being rejected multiple times by the NFL, he turned to the newly formed All-America Football Conference, the same league that launched the Cleveland Browns. He was granted a franchise and named the team the 49ers, a tribute to the fortune seekers of the 1849 California Gold Rush, a symbol of risk-taking and adventure that fit perfectly with San Francisco's identity. The team played its first games at Kezar Stadium in Golden Gate Park, and while they were often overshadowed by Paul Brown's powerhouse Browns, the 49ers were competitive and popular right out of the gate. In 1949, when the AAFC merged with the NFL, the 49ers were one of only 3 teams to survive the merger, but early NFL success was slow. For decades, the 49ers were competitive, but never champions. That all changed in the 1980s. The hiring of Bill Walsh in 1979 brought in a new philosophy: the West Coast offense, a short-passing, timing-based system that revolutionized football. With quarterback Joe Montana and later Steve Young, wide receiver Jerry Rice, and a defense anchored by Ronnie Lott, the 49ers became a dynasty. Between 1981 and 1994, they won 5 Super Bowls, cementing themselves as one of the greatest franchises in NFL history. Los Angeles Rams, founded 1936. The Rams' story begins not in California, but in the industrial Midwest. They were founded in 1936 as the Cleveland Rams, joining the NFL as part of the league's slow expansion during the Great Depression. After a few rocky seasons, the franchise found success, winning the NFL championship in 1945, led by quarterback Bob Waterfield. But then, something almost unheard of happened. Just 1 month after winning the title, the team left Cleveland. Owner Dan Reeves saw bigger opportunities out west. With the country emerging from World War II and the population booming in California, he decided to move the team to Los Angeles, making the Rams the first NFL franchise to play on the West Coast. Their new home was the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, a massive 90,000-seat stadium that gave the Rams instant visibility. But there was one condition: the Coliseum Commission required the team to be racially integrated if they were to play there. So in 1946, the Rams signed Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, 2 former UCLA stars, making them the first black players in the modern NFL era, a full year before Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier. That move helped reshape the league's future. Through the 1950s and 60s, the Rams developed a reputation for innovation and star power, with players like Norm Van Brocklin and later the fearsome defensive line known as the Fearsome Foursome. They moved to Anaheim in 1980, but stayed rooted in the Southern California identity. In 1995, the team relocated again, this time to St. Louis, where they'd win Super Bowl 34 with the greatest show on turf, led by Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, and Isaac Bruce. But in 2016, the Rams returned to Los Angeles, becoming the centerpiece of the NFL's new Hollywood vision. In 2021, they christened SoFi Stadium with a Super Bowl win, their first in LA, and fully re-established themselves as a West Coast powerhouse, Indianapolis Colts, founded 1953. The origins of the Colts franchise are a bit tangled, involving failed teams, a last-minute revival, and one of the most infamous relocations in NFL history. It starts with Baltimore, a city that had briefly hosted a team called the Colts in the early 1950s. That version of the franchise folded in 1951, but just 2 years later, in 1953, NFL owners approved a new team for Baltimore, using the same Colts name, colors, and fan identity. It wasn't technically the same franchise on paper, but for fans, the reborn Colts were a continuation of their team. Under ownership from Carroll Rosenblum, the Baltimore Colts became one of the league's most respected franchises. They drafted quarterback Johnny Unitas in 1956, and that changed everything. Unitas wasn't just good, he was a revolution. With his poise, arm strength, and leadership, he helped usher in the modern passing game. The Colts' 1958 NFL championship win over the Giants, a dramatic overtime thriller, became known as the greatest game ever played. It helped launch pro football into the national consciousness and made the Colts a household name. The team won NFL titles in 1958, 1959, and 1968, and finally captured Super Bowl V in 1970. But behind the scenes, the team was struggling with financial issues and stadium concerns. After years of disputes with the city of Baltimore, owner Robert Irsay made a controversial decision in 1984. He moved the Colts to Indianapolis and did it literally overnight, using Mayflower moving trucks under the cover of darkness. It became one of the most dramatic and bitter relocations in sports history. Despite the rocky start in Indiana, the Colts rebuilt, slowly. In 2006, they won Super Bowl 41, and even after Manning left, the team struck gold again with Andrew Luck. Buffalo Bills, founded 1960. Buffalo had a brief NFL history in the 1920s, but by mid-century it was without a team. That changed when Ralph Wilson, a Detroit-based businessman and one of the AFL's founding owners, brought pro football back to Western New York. He named the team the Buffalo Bills, inspired by a previous Buffalo franchise and the famous Wild West showman, Buffalo Bill Cody. Wilson's franchise quickly built a blue-collar identity, matching the spirit of the city it represented. The team's original stadium was War Memorial Stadium, affectionately called the Rock Pile, and it created one of the most passionate fan bases in football, the start of what would become Bills Mafia. The Bills found early success in the AFL. Led by legendary coach Lou Saban and quarterback Jack Kemp, they won back-to-back AFL championships in 1964 and 1965. But the real golden era came in the late 1980s and early 90s. Under head coach Marv Levy and general manager Bill Polian, the Bills built a juggernaut. With stars like Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and Bruce Smith, Buffalo made an unprecedented 4 straight Super Bowl appearances from 1990 to 1993. No team in NFL history has ever matched that streak, but heartbreak followed each time, with the Bills losing all 4 Super Bowls. With Josh Allen at quarterback and a re-energized defense, the Bills are once again a Super Bowl contender, and Buffalo is alive with belief again. Denver Broncos, founded 1960. Denver was not considered a prime football market at the time. The Broncos had one of the league's smallest stadiums, the least funding, and, perhaps worst of all, some of the worst uniforms in football history, famously featuring mustard yellow jerseys with vertically striped socks. But despite the rocky start, the team's presence in the mile-high city helped turn Denver into a football town. The fans were loyal, even as the team struggled through 10 straight losing seasons after its founding. Things began to shift in the 1970s. The team moved into Mile High Stadium, and the arrival of head coach Red Miller and the legendary Orange Crush defense gave Denver its first identity as a contender. In 1977, the Broncos reached Super Bowl XII, their first appearance. Even though they lost to the Cowboys, the stage was set. But the defining era of Broncos football began in 1983, when they pulled off one of the biggest draft trades in history. Quarterback John Elway, who had refused to play for the Baltimore Colts, was acquired by Denver in a franchise-changing move. Elway would become the face of the team for nearly 2 decades, leading the Broncos to 5 Super Bowl appearances and 3 AFC titles throughout his career. After Elway's retirement, the team went through a transitional period until another star quarterback arrived, Peyton Manning. In 2012, Denver signed the future Hall of Famer, and within a few years, the Broncos were once again at the top of the league. Kansas City Chiefs, founded 1960 as Dallas Texans. The franchise we know today as the Kansas City Chiefs actually began as the Dallas Texans, one of the original 8 teams in the American Football League in 1960. The team was founded by Lamar Hunt, the son of a Texas oil tycoon who had been repeatedly denied an NFL franchise. So he created his own league, the AFL, and put a team in Dallas to compete directly with the NFL's new expansion team, the Cowboys. That rivalry couldn't last. Despite early success, including an AFL championship in 1962, the Texans struggled for fan attention in Dallas. So Hunt made a bold decision. He moved the team to Kansas City in 1963 and rebranded them as the Chiefs, a name chosen to honor the nickname of Kansas City Mayor Harold Roe Bartle, who had been instrumental in bringing the team to town. It didn't take long for the Chiefs to become one of the AFL's most successful teams. Under head coach Hank Stram, and with stars like Len Dawson, Bobby Bell, and Willie Lanier, the Chiefs won 3 AFL championships, including a win in the final AFL-NFL championship game before the merger, Super Bowl IV in 1970. Where they upset the heavily favored Minnesota Vikings. That win helped legitimize the AFL as equal to the NFL and solidified Kansas City's place in football history. After that early peak, the Chiefs went into a decades-long drought with few playoff appearances and no Super Bowl trips. But they remained beloved in Kansas City, with one of the loudest and most loyal fan bases in the NFL at Arrowhead Stadium, which opened in 1972 and has become legendary for its deafening noise. Everything changed in the late 2010s when head coach Andy Reid and general manager Brett Veach built a new powerhouse centered around quarterback Patrick Mahomes, the 10th overall pick in the 2017 draft. With Mahomes, the Chiefs transformed into an offensive juggernaut. Dallas Cowboys, founded 1960. In the late 1950s, pro football had exploded in popularity across the U.S., but Texas, the heartland of high school and college football, had no NFL franchise. Oilman Clint Murchison Jr. saw an opportunity. He secured the rights to a team in 1960, but there was a catch. The NFL was hesitant to expand into Dallas because the rival AFL had already awarded a franchise there. So Murchison played a brilliant hand. He purchased the rights to the Washington Redskins fight song, Hail to the Redskins, from the composer, who had a grudge against Washington's owner. Then, Murchison used it as leverage. Either approve the Cowboys as a franchise or lose your fight song. It worked. The NFL granted Dallas its first ever team, and the Cowboys were born. From the start, the team had a modern vision. They hired Tom Landry, a former Giants defensive coordinator, known for his stoic presence and innovation. Landry created the flex defense, brought in advanced scouting, and helped establish Dallas as a forward-thinking operation, even if their early years were brutal. The Cowboys went winless in their debut season, but by the late 1960s, they became a juggernaut. They reached 5 Super Bowls in the 1970s, winning 2, and cemented themselves as the most glamorous franchise in the league. By the 1990s, under the flamboyant ownership of Jerry Jones, the Cowboys entered their second dynasty. Behind Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and head coach Jimmy Johnson, Dallas won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, dominating the decade. Nicknamed America's Team due to their nationwide following and iconic star logo, the Cowboys became more than just a football franchise. They were a brand, a symbol of winning, and a cultural touchstone. Las Vegas Raiders, founded 1960. They were originally founded in 1960 as the Oakland Raiders, joining the AFL as a late addition after the Minnesota Vikings backed out to join the NFL. With little time to prepare, Oakland scrambled to build a roster and a brand. and the early years were rough. But that all changed when Al Davis arrived. In 1963, Davis became the team's head coach and eventually the controlling owner. He brought swagger, defiance, and a win-at-all-costs mentality. Under his leadership, the Raiders adopted the iconic silver and black colors and a rebellious identity. Just win, baby. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, the Raiders became one of the most feared teams in football, led by legends like Ken Stabler, Fred Biletnikoff, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell, and John Madden as head coach. The Raiders won their first Super Bowl in 1976. But the Raiders were never stationary for long. In 1982, frustrated with stadium issues in Oakland, Davis moved the team to Los Angeles, becoming the LA Raiders. There, they reached new heights, winning Super Bowl XVIII in 1983 with a dominant performance against Washington. By 1995, the team moved back to Oakland, but the relationship between the franchise and the city never truly healed. The stadium situation remained poor, and despite some flashes of success, like their Super Bowl run in 2002, the Raiders struggled with consistency. Eventually, Al Davis's son, Mark Davis, inherited the team and sought a long-term solution. He found it in Las Vegas. In 2020, the franchise officially became the Las Vegas Raiders, moving into the state-of-the-art Allegiant Stadium just off the Vegas Strip. It marked the first NFL team in Nevada, and while it was a controversial move, it gave the Raiders a modern home, something they had long lacked. Los Angeles Chargers, founded 1960. The Los Angeles Chargers were one of the original 8 AFL franchises, founded in 1960 by hotel heir Baron Hilton, son of the Hilton Hotels empire. The team was based in Los Angeles for just one season before moving to San Diego in 1961. A decision driven by low attendance and the belief that a smaller market would offer a more passionate fan base. In San Diego, the Chargers quickly became one of the AFL's strongest franchises. Under head coach Sid Gilman, a visionary offensive mind, the team revolutionized the passing game. Gilman's offenses were vertical, fast-paced, and years ahead of their time, laying the groundwork for the modern NFL aerial attack. The Chargers made 5 AFL championship appearances in the 1960s and won their only league title in 1963, dominating the Boston Patriots 51-10. That remains the franchise's lone league championship. During their San Diego years, the team became known for electric players like Kellen Winslow and LaDainian Tomlinson. In the 2000s, San Diego saw a resurgence under head coach Marty Schottenheimer and later Norv Turner, with Tomlinson setting touchdown records and Phillip Rivers emerging as a durable, gunslinging quarterback. But despite deep playoff runs and talent across the roster, a Super Bowl appearance always remained just out of reach. Then came the controversial move. In 2017, after years of failed negotiations for a new stadium in San Diego, the Chargers relocated back to Los Angeles, becoming co-tenants with the Rams at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. The move angered much of their original fan base, and the team has struggled to build a strong following. However, with young quarterback Justin Herbert leading the charge and one of the most talented rosters in football, the Chargers are once again positioned to compete. New England Patriots, founded 1960. The franchise that would become the New England Patriots started modestly in 1960 as the Boston Patriots, a founding member of the AFL. Their original home field, Nickerson Field, followed by a nomadic stretch playing games at venues like Fenway Park, Harvard Stadium, and Boston College. The team's original logo, Pat Patriot, a Revolutionary War soldier hiking a football, was voted on by fans and captured the local identity. But success on the field was hard to come by. The Patriots reached just one AFL championship game in the league's 10-year history and lost badly to the Chargers in 1963. By 1971, after years of subpar stadiums and inconsistent play, the franchise rebranded as the New England Patriots and moved to a new stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts. It was an effort to expand the fan base beyond Boston and finally give the team a permanent home. For the next 2 decades, the Patriots were a middle-of-the-pack franchise. They reached Super Bowl XX in 1985 under head coach Raymond Berry, only to be steamrolled by the Chicago Bears' legendary defense. The 1990s brought even more inconsistency. until a series of events in the early 2000s would alter the course of NFL history. In 2000, the Patriots hired Bill Belichick as head coach, and in the 6th round of that same draft, they selected an unheralded quarterback out of Michigan, Tom Brady. 1 year later, Brady stepped in for injured starter Drew Bledsoe and never looked back. Under Belichick and Brady, the Patriots began a dynasty unmatched in modern football. From Tuck Rule games to Spygate, Deflategate, and the 28-3 comeback against the Falcons, the Patriots became the NFL's most talked about team, revered by some and hated by others. New York Jets, founded 1960. The team we now know as the New York Jets began its life in 1960 as the New York Titans, one of the 8 original members of the American Football League. At the time, they played in the old Polo Grounds, sharing the city with the far more established New York Giants, and trying desperately to find their footing. The Titans were underfunded, chaotic, and barely holding on financially. Players often practiced in public parks, and team operations were so unstable that players occasionally went unpaid. After just 3 seasons, the AFL stepped in and forced the sale of the team. That sale in 1963 changed everything. A new ownership group rebranded the team as the New York Jets, chose a green and white color scheme, and moved to Shea Stadium in Queens, right next to LaGuardia Airport. The name Jets was chosen to reflect the modern, high-flying image of the jet age and their new stadium's proximity to aviation. In 1965, the Jets made the boldest move in AFL history. They signed Joe Namath, a flashy, confident quarterback out of Alabama, to a then-record $427,000 contract. Namath became the face of the AFL and turned the Jets into must-watch TV. Then came the moment that put the AFL and the Jets into football lore. In 1969, Namath and the Jets upset the heavily favored Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III. It was the AFL's first Super Bowl win, and Namath famously guaranteed victory days before the game. That win not only changed the Jets' legacy, but forced the NFL to respect the AFL as a legitimate league, paving the way for the AFL-NFL merger. But after that shining moment, success became fleeting. The Jets have struggled for most of their post-merger history, plagued by quarterback instability, front office turnover, and postseason droughts. They've had brief flashes, like the Mark Sanchez-led AFC Championship runs in 2009 and 2010, but have not returned to the Super Bowl since Namath's iconic win. Tennessee Titans, founded 1960. The Tennessee Titans story begins not in Nashville, but in Houston, Texas. They were one of the founding franchises of the American Football League in 1960, originally known as the Houston Oilers, and they were immediate winners. The Oilers won the very first 2 AFL championships in 1960 and 1961. They played their early home games in Yepesen Stadium, and their oil derrick logo quickly became one of the most recognizable in football. For much of their early existence, the Oilers were known for offensive firepower and passionate fans. In the late 70s and early 80s, the team developed a blue-collar identity under head coach Bum Phillips and running back Earl Campbell, who powered through defenders like a freight train. In the late 1980s and early 90s, the Oilers evolved into a high-flying team with quarterback Warren Moon, who helped popularize the run-and-shoot offense. They made the playoffs in 7 consecutive seasons, but never broke through to the Super Bowl. Their most infamous moment? The 1993 AFC wildcard game, where they blew a 32-point lead to the Bills, still the largest comeback in NFL history. Frustrated by stadium disputes and a lack of public support in Houston, owner Bud Adams decided to relocate the franchise to Tennessee. In 1997, the team played as the Tennessee Oilers, first in Memphis and then in Nashville. But the name never quite fit the new location. By 1999, the franchise was officially rebranded as the Tennessee Titans, a name chosen to evoke power, tradition, and regional pride. That same year, they moved into their new home, Adelphia Coliseum, now Nissan Stadium, and made a storybook run to Super Bowl 34. That Super Bowl ended in heartbreak. The Titans came up 1 yard short of forcing overtime in one of the most dramatic endings in NFL history. Since then, the Titans have remained competitive, with multiple playoff appearances, stars like Steve McNair, Eddie George, Chris Johnson, and Derrick Henry, and a tough, physical brand of football. Minnesota Vikings, founded 1961. The Minnesota Vikings weren't supposed to be an NFL team at all, at least not originally. In the late 1950s, a group of Minneapolis businessmen, led by Max Winter, secured rights to a franchise in the rival American Football League. But just before launching, they were approached by the NFL with a better offer. Join the established league as an expansion franchise. The owners jumped at the chance, withdrew from the AFL, and in 1960 the Minnesota Vikings were officially born, set to begin play the following year. The name Vikings was chosen to reflect the region's strong Scandinavian heritage, a nod to Minnesota's large population of Nordic immigrants and its tough, rugged climate. From day one, the franchise leaned into that identity: cold weather, grit, and battle-tested football. The Vikings played their first season in 1961 and made an immediate splash by defeating the Chicago Bears in their debut game behind rookie quarterback Fran Tarkenton, who threw 4 touchdown passes. Though the team struggled early on, Tarkenton's arrival marked the beginning of a new era. In 1967, the Vikings hired Bud Grant, a no-nonsense coach who had dominated in the CFL. Under Grant, Minnesota became one of the most disciplined and physically imposing teams of the 1970s. The Purple People Eaters' defensive line, led by Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and Gary Larson, became the backbone of a dominant era. From 1969 to 1976, the Vikings made 4 Super Bowl appearances, but heartbreak followed them. They lost each time, unable to capture the elusive title. Still, they became synonymous with postseason excellence and toughness. Despite decades of coming close, the Vikings have yet to win a Super Bowl, but they've remained one of the most consistently competitive teams in the NFL. Atlanta Falcons, founded 1966. The Atlanta Falcons were born out of a bidding war between 2 leagues and became the NFL's first team in the Deep South. In the mid-1960s, the NFL and the AFL were aggressively expanding, racing to plant their flags in untapped markets. Atlanta, one of the fastest-growing cities in the country, became a prime target. Businessman Rankin Smith, an executive with the Life Insurance Company of Georgia, originally planned to purchase an AFL franchise, but the NFL didn't want to lose ground in a city that had just opened the brand new Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, so they stepped in fast. NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle offered Smith an expansion franchise, and to sweeten the deal, gave him exclusive NFL rights to the entire Southeast. Smith accepted, and in 1965, the Atlanta Falcons were officially awarded. The name Falcons was chosen through a fan contest. The winner, a local school teacher, said the Falcon was proud and dignified, with great courage and fight. That spirit would define the team's identity, even through decades of growing pains. Atlanta's early years were tough. The team didn't record a winning season until 1971, and only made the playoffs once in its first 12 years. In 1998, led by quarterback Chris Chandler, running back Jamal Anderson, and the legendary Dirty Bird celebration, the Falcons shocked the league by going 14-2 and reaching Super Bowl 33. Though they lost to Denver, it marked a turning point. In the 2000s and 2010s, with stars like Michael Vick, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Roddy White, the Falcons became regular contenders. They reached Super Bowl 51 in 2016, only to suffer one of the most infamous collapses in sports history. Miami Dolphins, founded 1966. They were founded by lawyer and politician Joe Robbie and entertainer Danny Thomas, who were awarded an AFL expansion team set to begin play in 1966. At the time, Miami was known more for beaches than football, and many doubted whether a pro team could succeed in a city with no tradition of cold weather gridiron grit. But the Dolphins didn't just survive, they built a legacy. In their early years, the Dolphins struggled. They wore bright aqua and orange, played in the Orange Bowl, and lost a lot of games. But things changed quickly after the AFL-NFL merger, especially with the hiring of head coach Don Shula in 1970. Shula had already made a name for himself with the Baltimore Colts, and his arrival instantly transformed the Dolphins. He emphasized discipline, fundamentals, and physicality. The turnaround was almost immediate. By 1971, the Dolphins reached their first Super Bowl. By 1972, they made history. That year, Miami won a perfect 14-0 in the regular season, then won all 3 of their playoff games, including Super Bowl VII, to become the only team in NFL history to finish a season undefeated. The 1972 Dolphins went 17-0, a feat that has never been matched. They followed it with another Super Bowl win in 1973. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the Dolphins remained a contender, thanks largely to the brilliance of quarterback Dan Marino. Drafted in 1983, Marino shattered passing records with his quick release and cannon arm. Though he never won a Super Bowl, he helped turn the Dolphins into a glamorous, must-watch franchise. New Orleans Saints, founded 1967. The New Orleans Saints were born on a day that felt almost scripted. November 1st, 1966, All Saints Day. It was a poetic coincidence that helped inspire the team's name, linking it forever with the city's deep Catholic roots, jazz heritage, and cultural flair. New Orleans had been lobbying for a professional football team for years. The city already had a rich sporting tradition and a population passionate about college football. When the NFL and AFL announced their merger in the mid-1960s, Congress insisted on expanding the league to new markets. That pressure helped fast-track New Orleans into the NFL. The franchise was awarded to businessman John W. Mecom Jr., and the team was officially introduced in 1967. Their black and gold colors symbolize the region's ties to oil, black gold, and wealth, while their fleur-de-lis logo drew directly from French heritage and the city's European influence. But while the Saints' branding was iconic from the start, their play on the field was anything but. New Orleans became known as the lovable losers of the league. In fact, it took 20 seasons before the Saints had their first winning record, not until 1987. The team's early years were marked by heartbreak, bizarre moments, and devoted fans who showed up week after week, even when many jokingly wore paper bags over their heads, calling themselves the Aints. But the true transformation came in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The Superdome was severely damaged, and the franchise was temporarily relocated. Many questioned whether the Saints would ever return. Then came 2006. New head coach Sean Payton, quarterback Drew Brees, and a rejuvenated city rallied around each other. The Saints returned to New Orleans that season and made the NFC Championship, just 1 year after devastation. 3 years later, in 2009, they completed the dream, winning Super Bowl 44 and delivering the city its first championship. Cincinnati Bengals, founded 1968. The Cincinnati Bengals were founded as part of a strategic master plan, one created by Paul Brown, one of the most legendary figures in football history. By the late 1960s, Paul Brown had already done it all. He had founded and coached the Cleveland Browns, revolutionized the game with film study, playbooks, and organized coaching staffs, and won multiple championships. But after being controversially fired by the Browns in 1963, he wasn't done with football. He was just getting started, again. When the AFL announced its final expansion team before the merger with the NFL, Browns saw an opening. A new franchise was awarded to Cincinnati in 1967, set to begin play in 1968, and Paul Brown was placed in charge as both part owner and head coach. The name Bengals was chosen as a tribute to a previous pro team from the city in the 1930s. But it also gave the new franchise a strong, fierce identity. The Bengals began play in the American Football League in 1968 and transitioned to the NFL with the 1970 merger. Despite being a new team, they were competitive quickly. Brown's experience and eye for talent gave Cincinnati a massive advantage. In 1970, their first year in the NFL, the Bengals won their division and made the playoffs. A decade later, they became one of the most exciting teams in football under head coach Forrest Gregg and quarterback Ken Anderson, reaching Super Bowl 16 in the 1981 season. Though they lost to Joe Montana's 49ers, the Bengals were now a serious contender. The next few decades brought inconsistency and disappointment, a stretch known painfully by fans as the Bungles era. But everything changed with the arrival of Joe Burrow in 2020. With Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and a rebuilt defense, The Bengals made a stunning Super Bowl run in the 2021 season, falling just short against the Rams, but proving Cincinnati was back among the NFL's elite. Seattle Seahawks, founded 1976. In the 1970s, the NFL was expanding its footprint, and Seattle, a booming port city with no pro football team, emerged as a top target. The league awarded an expansion franchise to a group of Seattle businessmen led by Lloyd W. Nordstrom, the department store heir, in 1974. The team would begin play in 1976, along with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The name Seahawks was chosen through a public contest. Out of over 20,000 submissions, Seahawks was selected for its regional relevance and aggressive tone. The name perfectly fit the Pacific Northwest's rugged coastal identity. The Seahawks played their first season at the Kingdom, a concrete dome that echoed with noise and quickly earned a reputation as one of the loudest stadiums in football. The team struggled early on, but by the early 1980s, they were turning heads with young talent and a passionate fan base that would soon become legendary. Seattle's early stars included wide receiver Steve Largent, who would go on to become one of the greatest pass catchers in NFL history. Under head coach Chuck Knox, the Seahawks reached their first AFC championship game in 1983, led by a tough defense and bruising running backs like Kurt Warner. After bouncing between ups and downs for decades, and even switching conferences from the AFC to the NFC in 2002 due to realignment, the franchise's true rise came under head coach Pete Carroll. By the early 2010s, the Seahawks had built one of the NFL's most dominant defenses, nicknamed the Legion of Boom. With stars like Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and Bobby Wagner, paired with the electric, undersized quarterback Russell Wilson and powerhouse running back Marshawn Lynch, the Seahawks became an unstoppable force. In 2013, they reached the pinnacle, dominating the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 48 to win their first championship in franchise history. They returned the next year, but fell in heartbreaking fashion to the Patriots after throwing the ball on the 1-yard line instead of giving it to Lynch, a decision still debated today. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, founded 1976. Awarded as part of the same 1976 expansion that birthed the Seattle Seahawks, the Buccaneers became the first NFL franchise based in Florida. The team was founded by wealthy businessman Hugh Culverhouse, who saw opportunity in the rapidly growing Tampa Bay area, a region passionate about football, but with no pro team to support. The Bucs' name was inspired by Florida's pirate history, particularly the legend surrounding the pirate Jose Gaspar, who was said to have prowled the Gulf Coast. The team's original mascot, Buccaneer Bruce, and their creamsicle orange uniforms quickly became iconic, and, at times, infamous. Their early seasons were brutal. The Buccaneers lost their first 26 games, setting an NFL record for futility. First head coach John McKay, known for his dry wit, once responded to a question about his team's execution by saying, "I'm in favor of it." But things turned around faster than expected. By 1979, just 3 seasons after their first win, the Buccaneers made the NFC Championship game, led by a ferocious defense starring Leroy Selman and a solid run game behind Ricky Bell. Tampa had gone from laughingstock to contender. Unfortunately, success didn't last. The 1980s and early 1990s were filled with instability, poor drafts, and endless coaching changes. The team became synonymous with losing, until everything changed in the late 90s. Under head coach Tony Dungy, the Buccaneers built one of the NFL's most feared defenses. With stars like Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, John Lynch, and Rondé Barber, they laid the foundation for a winning culture. But it was John Gruden, hired in 2002, who brought it all together. In Super Bowl 37, the Buccaneers demolished the Oakland Raiders with a legendary defensive performance, claiming their first championship. Tampa had finally reached the mountaintop with defense, swagger, and redemption. Fast forward to 2020, and history repeated itself in even grander fashion. The Bucs signed Tom Brady, assembled a veteran-heavy roster, and won Super Bowl 55 in their own stadium, the first team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl at home. Carolina Panthers, founded 1995. Awarded in 1993 and beginning play in 1995, the Panthers were the result of businessman Jerry Richardson's decade-long campaign to bring professional football to the Carolinas. Richardson, a former NFL player turned fast food magnate, pitched the NFL a vision of a regional franchise, one that would unite North and South Carolina under a single team. Charlotte, North Carolina, was chosen as the home base. It was a city on the rise, with growing corporate power and sports potential. The team was initially based at Clemson University's Memorial Stadium, while their new home, Bank of America Stadium, was being built in downtown Charlotte. From the beginning, the Panthers did something unheard of for an expansion team. They won. Under head coach Dom Capers, Carolina finished their second season in 1996 with a 12-4 record, winning the NFC West and advancing all the way to the NFC Championship game. It was the fastest rise to prominence in NFL history at the time, and it instantly put the Panthers on the map. The early stars included linebacker Sam Mills, who coined the team's enduring slogan, "Keep Pounding," a mantra that still echoes through the stadium every Sunday. In 2003, they reached Super Bowl 38, narrowly losing to the New England Patriots in one of the most competitive Super Bowls ever played. The next decade brought another defining era, the Cam Newton years. Drafted first overall in 2011, Newton electrified the league with his size, speed, and charisma. In 2015, they went 15-1, steamrolling their way to Super Bowl 50. Newton won NFL MVP, and Carolina became the face of the league for a season. But once again, the story ended in Super Bowl heartbreak, this time to the Denver Broncos. Jacksonville Jaguars, founded 1995. The Jacksonville Jaguars were one of the biggest surprises in NFL expansion history, a small market team that beat out bigger cities and quickly became competitive on the field. In the early 1990s, the NFL was looking to expand, and cities like St. Louis, Baltimore, and Memphis were considered frontrunners. But in a major upset, Jacksonville, Florida, a mid-sized city with no major professional sports team, was awarded a franchise in 1993, set to begin play in 1995 alongside the Carolina Panthers. The team was founded by Wayne Weaver, a businessman from the shoe industry, and he pushed hard to convince the league that Jacksonville could support an NFL team. His pitch worked, and when the announcement was made, many around the league were stunned. The Jaguars debuted in 1995 under head coach Tom Coughlin, who had total control of football operations. Expectations were modest. Most expansion teams take years to build, but Jacksonville broke the mold. By 1996, in just their second season, the Jaguars shocked the league by going 9-7 and making the playoffs. Even more shocking, they upset the Buffalo Bills and Denver Broncos on the road to reach the AFC Championship game. It was one of the most improbable playoff runs ever for such a young team. But after that early burst of success, the 2000s were more difficult. The team struggled with roster turnover, coaching changes, and declining attendance. Then came a resurgence in 2017, led by a fearsome defense nicknamed Saxonville. Featuring Jalen Ramsey and Calais Campbell, the Jaguars made a run all the way to the AFC Championship game, nearly taking down the Patriots in Foxborough. Today, with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and Doug Peterson as head coach, Jacksonville is once again building something special. Baltimore Ravens, founded 1996. The Baltimore Ravens weren't born like most NFL franchises. They were ripped from the heart of another city, the result of one of the most controversial moves in league history. In the mid-1990s, Baltimore had been without an NFL team for over a decade, ever since the Colts packed up and left for Indianapolis in the middle of the night in 1984. The city had tried everything to get a team back, including failed bids for expansion. But their second chance came not through the league, but through relocation. In 1996, Cleveland Browns owner Art Modell shocked the football world by announcing he would move the Browns to Baltimore. The backlash was instant. Cleveland fans were furious, the NFL was under pressure, and lawsuits flew from every direction. The compromise? Cleveland would get to keep the Browns' name, colors, and history. Modell would move the players, coaches, and front office to Baltimore, but they would become an entirely new franchise, the Baltimore Ravens. The name Ravens was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, the famous poet who lived and died in Baltimore, and whose iconic poem, The Raven, became a symbol of the city's literary legacy. From the start, the Ravens built their identity on defense. In 1996, they drafted Jonathan Ogden, a Hall of Fame left tackle, and Ray Lewis, a linebacker, who would become the heart and soul of the franchise. Over the next few years, they added more defensive legends like Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs, crafting one of the greatest units the game has ever seen. By 2000, that defense reached historic levels. The Ravens allowed just 165 points in the entire regular season, the fewest ever in a 16-game season, and rode that dominance to a blowout win in Super Bowl 35, crushing the New York Giants. They would win another Super Bowl in 2012 in the final season of Ray Lewis's legendary career. This time, they were led by quarterback Joe Flacco, who put together a flawless playoff run. In recent years, Baltimore has continued to innovate. In 2018, they drafted quarterback Lamar Jackson, whose electrifying speed and unique play style earned him NFL MVP. Once again, the Ravens had a star and a new era. Houston Texans, founded 2002. The Houston Texans are the youngest franchise in the NFL, but their creation filled a void left by heartbreak. For decades, Houston was home to the Oilers, a proud AFL original team known for stars like Earl Campbell, Warren Moon, and one of the most passionate fan bases in football. But in 1997, after years of stadium issues and declining attendance, the Oilers moved to Tennessee, becoming the Titans. The city was stunned. Houston, a football-mad town, was suddenly without a team. That didn't last long. Enter Bob McNair, a billionaire businessman with a vision. Determined to bring football back to Houston, McNair led a successful bid for an expansion franchise, beating out cities like Los Angeles. The NFL officially awarded Houston a new team in 1999, set to begin play in 2002. The name Texans was chosen to reflect state pride, a tribute to the identity and culture of Texas itself. The team's bull logo, star emblem, and red, white, and blue color scheme all emphasized that this was more than just a football team. It was a Texas brand. The Texans played their first game on September 8th, 2002, and made an immediate statement, upsetting the Dallas Cowboys in their franchise debut. Early years were rocky. The team struggled to find stability and suffered through multiple losing seasons. But the pieces started to come together in the late 2000s. The Texans drafted Andre Johnson, a dominant wide receiver, and later found their franchise pass rusher in J.J. Watt, who would go on to win 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Under head coach Gary Kubiak and later Bill O'Brien, Houston became a playoff regular in the 2010s. With Watt anchoring the defense and stars like Arian Foster and DeAndre Hopkins on offense, the Texans built a strong identity. In 2017, they drafted quarterback Deshaun Watson, who added explosive playmaking to their offense and helped lead multiple playoff runs. But turmoil followed. A series of off-field controversies, front office instability, and years of roster mismanagement set the team back. Now, with C.J. Stroud at quarterback and DeMeco Ryans as head coach, the Texans are entering a new era. Stroud's breakout rookie season and the team's rapid turnaround have reignited hope in Houston, proving that even the NFL's youngest team can build something special, fast. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.